The protagonist in their story is a woman named Ah-yeong. She is a veterinarian and the director of an animal hospital. She sat at her desk playing games on her phone angrily. The reason she was angry was because he was in her 30s and things had not gone as planned. Her last job was as a doctor. He worked and fought with her boss and ended up quitting. She realized that she didn't want to do it. She doesn't want to work under someone, and she gains the confidence to open her own animal hospital. She only had a few staff, but the hospital had good facilities when it first opened. Ah-yeong had a great feeling of pride and satisfaction. However, the joy quickly fades when she discovers the reality of the situation when running a pet hospital is not easy, yet she has put so much money into their business. Now it's too late to stop. She put down her cell phone and went to the empty waiting room to watch TV. A famous doctor who advertised her at Ah-yeong's animal hospital, thinking that maybe she could do it. Suddenly the phone rang and she picked up hers. It was someone asking if they could handle a reptile. The receptionist Ah-yeong informed them that they would arrive. Ah-yeong rushed to the table screaming, it was them. She nervously washed the sweat off her face. It had been a long time since she had seen a reptile, but right now he would take any customer she could get. She couldn't make any money in particular. He can treat reptiles. Now all of those things are about money and business. Ah-yeong patiently sat at her desk and waited for their new customer to arrive. Carefully practice. Would she say much to her? Disappointment. Nearly 3 hours passed, and they still had not shown up. He began to regret many things. Today had been really hard, but he was still waiting for the customers she would see. So she can't go home first. The other employees finished their shifts while he remained waiting at her desk. She dreams of a comfortable home with her pet cat, Ed. The darkness of the night came, about hours later, and she decided enough. Enough was enough for her to leave the hospital, and she started to lock the door when a woman in yellow came in with red earrings. She asked if they could treat the reptiles. Today may be tired day, but she will not refuse customers. She pushed her inside, allowing her to enter, and turned the light back on. However, she was confused. The woman did not have any pets with her. Then must mean their woman might want to buy some pet food supplies. Knowing she had plenty of stock available, she asked what the women needed. The woman sheepishly stated that she had a reptile that needed care and that she was the person from the phone call earlier. Remembering the phone call, but she wants to know where the reptile is. The woman had brought nothing with her. The woman fidgeted with her hands, sweating from nervousness, and stuttered. Finally, she swallowed hard, trying to tell Ah-yeong, who still looked confused, in front of her. Then the woman said that she was the one who needed treatment. The woman admits that she is a reptile. Suddenly, Ah-yeong was shocked because this was an animal hospital, and if the woman needs other treatment, she can go directly to another hospital. Then Ah-yeong slammed the table with her hands and said she would report to the police if the woman continued to talk nonsense, because all she wants is to be able to go home from work, and because of that woman's madness she had to deal with her. But the woman persisted. Her problems caused her a lot of trouble, and there was no one that she couldn't leave. Ah-yeong desperately grabbed her cell phone and started putting it into her bag, getting ready to leave it. She felt humiliated by this whole incident. She suddenly looked up and saw something completely shocking, which caused her phone to fall to the ground. What she found was that right now she was face to face with the head of a very large blue dragon with a red snout. Her breath blew Ah-yeong's hair back. Blue dragon with red horns and yellow eyes. Its body was so long it barely even fit in the room. Then, after everything she'd seen, the dragon said, "Dragons count as reptiles, don't they?" The next day, Ah-yeong started working as if nothing had happened. She came to her hospital reeking of alcohol. Like she had too much to drink. When she got back to her house, the employees stopped her as he entered. He pointed at a corner and asked what was going on with her shocked face. The door to the infirmary had been completely ripped and bent, like it had been shaped by something very strong. As everyone stared at Ah-yeong, who got a strange phone call from someone informing her that the 3 cans of a certain medicine she ordered were on their way and would be delivered the day after tomorrow. He hung up the phone, wondering, what's with their guy talking? It hit her lies. She started to remember every single thing that happened last night. She comes face to face with a shape-shifting woman capable of transforming into a mighty blue dragon. Upon seeing them, she rushed to the infirmary and locked the door, begging for mercy and asking the dragon not to eat her. He's not feeling well. The dragon gripped the door with its mighty claws and tore it from its hinges. It seemed that Kim Ah-yeong was displeased and frightened, and the dragon promised not to eat it, no matter what. The dragon changed back into a real woman. Previously, her name was Chung-ah. He is 156 years old. She was the 7th youngest daughter of the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, and the species was a reptile. Kim Ah-yeong wasn't sure if a dragon would fall into the reptile category. Recalling last night's events, he didn't know what to say. She sat at her desk with puffy eyes, then asked what treatment the dragon needed. Chung-ah is embarrassed to admit it, but the reason she's here is because she actually needs to buy some insect repellent. The doctor couldn't possibly understand why a dragon would need insect repellent, until the woman explained her problem with roundworms and other parasites from eating raw fish. She knew she was supposed to be cooking fish, but fresh raw fish was too good to eat. If she is really worried about parasites, the doctor offers to do a parasite test. Chung-ah is interested until she finds out it involves checking her poop. Thinking of there made her recoil in disgust. Kim Ah-yeong was getting fed up and slammed on the table. There was a veterinary hospital, and patients had to be prepared to have open bodies and minds to receive proper treatment. Chung-ah doesn't like the idea about someone littering her poop. It wasn't until she was about to go home that the doctor decided that he would just give her the medicine without any tests. To get the dosage right, she asked the dragon how much she weighed. Again, she recoiled and was disgusted, because it's impolite to ask about a woman's weight. By the time Kim Ah-yeong was really fed up and the dragon started to make her nervous, seeing Chung-ah nervously admit that it weighs more than 500 tubes. That weight is quite small for a blue dragon. 500 tubes is the equivalent weight of about 3 bulls. They currently don't have enough medicine in stock, so Kim Ah-yeong had to be placed in command. She told the dragon to come back in 3 days. When it was delivered, it made Chung-ah happy. She knew she was late today and was sorry for all the commotion she caused. She came out of the hospital with a smile on her face and said he would be back in 3 days for her treatment time. Now 3 days later, and the doctor prepared a checklist. When will the dragons return? She has insect repellent. Then she prepared a baseball bat, a gun, and a good luck charm. She was prepared for every possible situation that might arise. The baseball bat was gripped tightly in her hands, and he waited in anticipation. Many surprised her. The dragon appeared right behind her and caused Kim Ah-yeong to fall backwards. She begged to apologize to the doctor for showing her true dragon form the last time they met. It was because she didn't think it would cause serious trouble for the doctor. Then Kim Ah-yeong started rolling up her sleeves, and again showed that there was insect repellent underneath. Here are 3 tubs full of medicine stacked on the table. She only needs to take it once, and then if roundworms are still there 2 weeks, he must return. Chung-ah is grateful for the doctor's help and actually has a few more requests. What she wants is to find out if our protagonist is willing to pay a home health visit. Because basically, Chung-ah doesn't really understand human medicine dosage, and there are families who need care. At first, Kim Ah-yeong didn't want to do that, but when she heard that Chung-ah would pay double the price, she immediately agreed. The doctor said that it was her duty as a veterinarian to treat animals. Kim Ah-yeong with her hand on her chest, and she said she loved being the doctor for the dragon family. With all her heart and soul, he could barely contain her joy. Money is the best. That thing in the capitalist world is about money. It was a beautiful night after struggling for a long time. It seemed like everything was finally turning out well. No matter how little he does, the protagonist knows that her involvement with dragons will cause her a lot of trouble in the near future. It is a day of heavy rain and one of the employees is looking out the window. What he hates is rainy days like this because it makes her feel unwell, and sometimes she sees strange ghostly things. Kim Ah-yeong was worried. She doesn't believe in ghosts and thinks her employees are just talking nonsense. She put her head on the table and the great dragon should have come back if there was a problem. But it's been a whole month, and she still hasn't come. Kim Ah-yeong started wondering if she would appear again. Suddenly a man was walking in the rain and holding something in his arm. He was panting and asking our protagonist for help. He says he is here because of Chung-ah. Upon hearing the dragon's name, Kim Ah-yeong jumped up and pushed the man into her office, locked the door behind them. She took out her trusty baseball bat and started asking what he wanted. She wanted to know if she was a blue dragon too, and the man didn't answer and instead placed a basket on the table. Then asked the doctor to see the condition of his wife in the basket. There are chickens. The man says he really married a chicken. What lies is this again? The doctor was confused and wondered how the cock could be his wife. The man took offense at this statement, calling her rude. His wife is not a chicken, her name is Bong, and she is both a phoenix. However, his wife changed into this form to maintain her health. Bong assures the doctor he won't randomly transform into a phoenix unless she needs to. He just wanted his wife to come back. He put away the baseball bat and held the chicken, the man's wife. It wasn't her specialty, so he wasn't sure about what treatment he could ask. Why didn't Bong just go to another hospital? This animal hospital is the only one who knows who they really are. If this hospitals found out about such mythical beasts, they would be terrified. The man took out a red bag from his suit. He's willing to pay the doctor well. For her treatment, of course, this gave Kim Ah-yeong a lot of motivation. There was so much money in the shining bag that lit up her face. He put the chicken in the nursing room. For now, he thought he must be mad. He only knows the basics of birds. And she does this solely for money. Bong seems to be really desperate and begs her to save her wife, which a phoenix noble asks for such a favor. Seriously, Kim Ah-yeong knew if she messed up it would be bad. So she considered telling the man that she couldn't do that. He takes out a rock from her pocket that Bong gave her. Apparently, if he rubbed it 3 times, the two of them could communicate. Before she rubbed it, she turned to her side and looked at her bag. Money shines on the floor. It must be at least many hundreds of coins. Since Kim Ah-yeong was already paid, she knew she couldn't give up now and just had to do her best. Chickens get a lot of tests. A series of tests are performed on it, such as x-rays and inspections. Couldn't find anything wrong with it. It just seemed like ordinary chicken. Even if she did a urine test and a blood test, she couldn't tell what phoenix blood was. It should be like, so she had nothing to compare it to. Even with her medical book, it was pointless telling her to dissect a chicken to examine. The lesion she threw across the room and into the reddish box. Knowing that she couldn't perform autopsies on living things, out of nowhere a child's voice started echoing from the box, getting louder and louder. When the doctor looked inside, she found a chick with yellow fetus and very small. With teary eyes, the chicks started crying because of their mother and asked if they would go and die. It was clear she was in deep trouble. It was the same distress that could be seen on Kim Ah-yeong's face. As she tries to wrap her head around what happened, he immediately calls out to the Bong, who gets teary-eyed at the sight of his son, who just wants to be near his mother. The hospital employees looked at him, finding it strange that a middle-aged man was crying over a chick. Once again, the doctor pushed the man into the examining room, and he slammed the door, closing and locking it. She takes out a needle, demanding that she let him perform an examination of the cock's upper body. This about him offends Bong, who is worried that she will do all kinds of experiments on her and then turn her over to the government. This guy has obviously watched too many sci-fi movies, and that's not going to happen at all. Kim Ah-yeong only needed to take a blood sample so he could compare it, and that's the only way. She will get a diagnosis on the case. Bong allows it to happen. As the chick sits on its shoulder, it doesn't take long for all the blood to collect. Now that the Bong is not needed, she is free to return home, but the chicks don't want to leave and want to stay with their mother. They both argue about this, with the man saying the chick couldn't stay because it would make the doctors uncomfortable. The doctor seemed to scratch his head and said he was fine. If he left a chick here that looked so young, it must have missed its mother's arm, plus he was getting paid so much for this. Just Bong go for a bit. At the animal hospital, a chick is seen waiting by its mother's side while the doctor analyzes her blood. What the doctor noticed there was a lot of a certain type of white bacteria, blood cells that play a role in fighting parasites and infections. This was unusual, as when he did an inspection he found no parasites on the chicken's body. Whatever his stomach was rumbling and he looked at the clock, it was way too late. So he decided to take a break and get some snacks from the convenience store. While walking down the street, the neighborhood seems especially quiet these days, until he crashed into a peach tree. One he had never seen before. Kim Ah-yeong pondered whether it had always been there or not. While doing this, An old man stumbled past while singing a song. Trying to see something blind with open eyes doesn't have to see you will see it, or not even if it's right in front of you. You will see it or not. He passed by Kim Ah-yeong, deciding that he would take out his phone and take a picture of the tree. When an aged man spouts some random gibberish while holding up an empty bottle. This surprised the doctor. She pointed a round finger at her, saying she just hit a wall. Kim Ah-yeong didn't know what he was talking about and assumed he was drunk. He should just leave. He didn't want any trouble with the man. He claims not to be drunk and snatches the phone from him. He danced mockingly with it. In his arms, Ah-yeong pounced forward in frustration, trying to get him back, but the man disappeared almost instantly. To his surprise, he appeared behind him. Sitting in the tree, the old man taunts him. He says he has to catch him if he can. Then he appeared one more time near the roof, as if he could teleport or something. Ah-yeong shouted. This was when she appeared right in front of him again. If he doesn't know who he is, then he obviously didn't know how to treat his patients. If the patient is special, then their treatment is also special. The old man called the doctor a fool for not knowing such a thing. It was Kim Ah-yeong flabbergasted how a man this old knew the kind of patients. He treats her even better. How would he know how to treat them properly? The old man scratched his silky beard while muttering to himself. He said the doctor could help him, even though he couldn't do it with his bare hands. He pointed at the golden pouch hidden inside his jacket that he had noticed just now. He handed it over. Then he would teach him what he needed to know. The doctor clutched his chest. This money was a precious thing and he didn't want to part. Parents called him a bastard. It was the queen of all wild animals in critical condition, but he's being tight-fisted. Besides, he's been stealing old money bags without him even noticing. He joked that the doctor was slow in brain and his body must be getting worse. Desperate to get his money back, she charged forward and grabbed the man in a demanding grip like that. He gave it all back to the old man. He disappeared again into thin air. Nothing but a doctor's call, and a message: wash your face with boiled dango water during the festivities, and your senses will awaken your eyes. He desperately searched his surroundings, wondering where the man had teleported to. For now he assumed he should be in the peach tree, but after turning around, he saw that it had completely disappeared. His face was confused. What just happened? And why did he know that he was taking care of the phoenix? He wanted to know who the old man was. Currently back at the hospital, Kim Ah-yeong came over to the little chick. Ah-yeong called him as cute, but the chick said that his name was not cute. He is called Bongpal. Then the vet asked him if he knew what dongho was about. The dongho is a bird that looks like a pheasant and flies using its whisker feathers instead of wings. The doctor's imagination tried to make Kim Ah-yeong the bird fly without using wings. While Kim Ah-yeong was teaching Kim Ah-yeong what the bird looked like, the chick said that his father had said that his father was the king of all birds. After all, if the dango was a bird, then the doctor realized he could have asked the bong to bring it to him. Looking at the clock, he started to panic. The message said he should wash his face with water. During the celebration, which was a period of time between 1 and 3 in the morning, and he realized that 30 minutes of his time had been wasted. He started to hastily rub the rocks, hoping to summon a bong. For a moment, nothing happens, and he wonders if he got it right until the bong pushes open the door and rushes in. He wanted to know if something bad had happened to his wife. The doctor turned to him and immediately said that he needed a dangho bird, and he needed it quickly before 3 o'clock. Bong is confused why the doctor is suddenly looking for a bird when he has to treat his wife. Ah-yeong needed the next few minutes to explain everything about last night's incident when a strange old man took his money. Bong shook his head and looked at the floor in disappointment. This is too dangerous, and it's not something an ordinary human can handle. When you wash your face with boiled dango water, the eyes and ears will wake up. Humans will begin to see and hear things that are not part of the human world. He wondered what he meant by this. Did he say that he would be able to see ghost-like things? Bong confirms that he is right. Not only will he be able to see ghosts, but he will also be able to see divine beings, and even evil creatures called monsters. These monsters find pleasure in torturing those who are able to see them, and this torment usually doesn't just end there. Simple intimidation if something went wrong, then Kim Ah-yeong would not be able to save his life and soul, and might even be subject to eternal suffering. He would be stuck at the border between this world and the afterlife. The doctor knows it all sounds bad, but this is the only way he can save Huang. At times, all he could do was take his time while assessing Huang's condition. Her condition was so bad, seeing her struggling, the man put his hand on her shoulder. They should find another way together, and if there really is no other way, then it's heaven's will and it won't hurt if his wife dies. Ah-yeong didn't say anything, she just clenched her fists. There is a sure way to save Huang, and he doesn't just want to stand around and watch him die doing nothing. The chick started crying over the man's shoulder. He asks if Mom is going to die. He looks at the doctor with sad, wide eyes. This only made the doctor feel more angry and desperate. He leaves the bong, standing in the middle of the hospital. He kicked open the door and stood in the street screaming, instructing the old scammer to come and return the money. The old man comes up behind him, wanting to know why he called him a scammer. Besides, he already spent all his money drinking. Kim Ah-yeong flicked her head back, looking at the old man. The reason for calling him a scammer was because he gave her a method that even a normal human couldn't use. The old man choked back. He confirmed that by following that method, he would be able to see and hear a bit more than the others, like monsters and ghosts. However, she told him about it because she knew the doctor wasn't her type, one who would be discouraged by such things. Kim Ah-yeong, who was angry at this old man. Ever since they met, he has been acting like he knows her, but he definitely doesn't know her. Wasn't this prompting the man to rush up and hit him on the head with his bottle? He let her go and called her a scammer. He couldn't stand any more humiliation anymore. Apparently he knew the doctor well. Then the old man said that he was always on the verge of failure, and he thought this was his destiny. And she didn't believe in the man's lies. He rubbed his head and recovered from the bottle that had just hit him. It was then that the old man reached out and grabbed his cheek, like when he was a kid and someone called him smart kid, and encouraged him to do whatever he can. When the doctors looked for him, he had disappeared again, and there was nothing in front of him but an empty road. He stood in a frustrated pose with his fists clenched. This crazy old man actually disappeared again. After that, said something very unusual. He cursed God. If something happened to him while washing in Dangho water, he would demand compensation. Whether it's the bong or the parents, he will get what he deserves. He went back inside and started talking to the bong. He will. When he knew he could go fight back, the vet was willing to wash his face in Dangho water. It's already 2 in the morning, so they have less than an hour left. He asks Bong about the bird as soon as possible. Despite knowing it is dangerous, Bong agrees as the doctor insists. Then the wind starts to circle around the bong. Until then he disappears for a bit and comes back with a dango in his hand. Then he put the dangho into the water and soaked it. Ah-yeong couldn't believe what he was seeing. Does he have to wash his face with this dirty soaking water? While the dangho bird, which is now clean, looks at him. Ah-yeong looked at the water with disgusting eyes. The water smelled bad. In this case, the skin is an important part of the body and should not come into contact with dirt. He held his breath and closed his eyes, preparing himself for what was coming next. He hesitantly splashes dirty water all over his face while the bong watches closely. Once that was done, he gave her a towel so she could dry herself. With eyes still closed and says thanks, but Bong tells him it's not him. He was the one who handed the towel to her. When Kim Ah-yeong looked up, she saw that the towel was from a spooky creature, a creature that causes nightmares. The doctor darts backwards as the creature fades from reality and into nothingness. The bong explains that the man is one of the ghosts attached to this hospital, and that there are more like him. He needn't have worried because now it was gone. This seems to be anything that would bring great harm. Glancing at the animal hospital, the doctor's mouth opened. It was full of ghosts of all different shapes and sizes. He rushes to Blood Huang to see if his newfound vision can help him heal the phoenix. That looks closely under the microscope, and it really works. Kim Ah-yeong started spouting a bunch of medical terms that confused the bong. His wife has gametogony, which is a Lucas type in zoonotic face. Bong probably resembles that someone else is watching at the moment without a clue what he's talking about. He explained in plain English that his wife had a type of single-cell parasite living inside her. This parasitic body had destroyed his white blood cells. Hearing this news seems to make Bong happy. If the doctor has found the cause, then it must mean he can treat it. He scratched his head, not really sure there was no guarantee. The normal antibiotics would work and the chickens appeared anemic and in critical condition. But with the confidence he has done many things as a doctor, and he is grateful. Whether his wife is able to fight off her illness or not is now completely up to heaven. He looked at her with a smile at the man's optimism. Over the next few days he worked hard, trying to make the Phoenix better. His employees were even starting to get worried, seeing that he had been working all day and all night without coming home. He will destroy his body. At this rate, he lies and assures them that he is fine and that they are free to go home on their own while he remains there. Although he looked exhausted, but the doctor was very happy. When looking at Huang, who seems to be mostly recovered and has a lot more energy than before. It wouldn't be long until he came back after ridiculous hours of work. The doctor was starting to fall asleep on his desk until he heard a loud bang. Sounds coming from the treatment room. He wiped the drool from his chin and jumped out of his chair, quickly rushing into the room to see what was going on. Two shining phoenixes were in front of him with yellow bodies, orange beards, and red hair. With a glittering golden light, Huang had returned to full health and Bong by his side. Their son was standing on their feet too. Ah-yeong could barely believe it. The scenery was truly beautiful. The female phoenix thanks him for her dedication. They were truly grateful from the bottom of their hearts. Their families will repay this debt for generations. Then came the little chick that was rubbing its head on its parent's leg. Feel happy that the doctor has saved his mother. Ah-yeong had a smile on her face seeing the family reunion, though the smile faded a little when she looked to her right. Her incubator had been shattered. Most of the glass had been shattered and everything was bent. He shouted at the phoenixes they actually blew up their incubators just because they recovered their powers. Expensive things. They are very sorry for this and will compensate him fairly for both. The cost of the machine and for the treatment of the Bong dispensing gold bars. The doctor's face lit up and he was stunned. It was more than enough. He could even pay back some of his student loans or buy a digital X-ray machine. The Phoenix family was happy to hear that. They lowered their heads and said goodbye, flapped their wings, and flew up into the sky. Ah-yeong waved to them with a smile almost as bright as the sun. He hopes he has loyal customers and have a safe journey and return soon. After days of non-stop work, he finally returned home and passed out on the floor. He didn't even bother to go to his bed. It was then that Edward's cat came walking over with his bells jingling. He put his paws on top of Ah-yeong's head, asking for fresh water in her bowl. Ah-yeong jumped in surprise, realizing that now she could understand what her cat was saying. He grabbed Edward and trembled. Since when can he talk? Edward had the same look, the fear on his face. Wonder how he could understand. Ever since he had taken care of the Phoenix, he had practically lived in the hospital. Some time ago, the day he would regularly come home to replace his old water Ed with a new one. Before returning soon, Edward always slept, even if Ah-yeong was at home or not. Then he never had to see her without someone else to talk to. Ah-yeong started to tell everything that had happened to her to Ed, who was listening carefully. The cat thought he was an idiot for washing his face with water, and had his spiritual eyes awakened, meaning his life would be terrible from now on. Ah-yeong vigorously patted her cat, calling it rough. Does it really happen talking to him like this all the time? Edward stood up and backed away. How dare he treat her like this? She wasn't an ordinary cat. The reason she was able to understand was because she gained the ability to talk to animals, but because she was special. Ah-yeong was confused, asking if Ed was some kind of monster cat or mythical beast. The cat angrily said, revealing that he wasn't even on the same level as a cat. He is a tiger and king of the great mountains in the west. All animals kneel down before him, and humans are in awe of him. However, Edward made a grave mistake, and as a result was carried out by humans and sealed in the body of a cat. Ah-yeong was interested to know what Edward was doing. Was it really that bad? Pacing conspicuously if she told him she might not be able to sleep tonight. Before he starved to death, he broke a taboo. He killed humans and ate their flesh. Edward looked proud. Edward stood on two paws with the other two on his hips. He boasted that he was a great and vicious tiger to be feared. Ah-yeong wasn't happy hearing this, and grabbed her cat, giving her good advice, and swatted it. when Edward clawed at his hand, demanding to know why he wasn't afraid of him. He's a vet, and it would be weird for a show to be afraid of cats. Even if Edward used to be a tiger, he spent the last 5 years taking care of him. As if he was a hat being jumped. Edward into bed shook his head. Now that the owner could understand what he was saying, then there were some matters he wanted to settle first. Out of all, his real name is Jeha, which means one who will achieve enlightenment and do great things. He didn't want a stupid name like Edward. Kim Ah-yeong tried to persuade him that Edward was a nice name, but cats don't have it. She knew that she actually got that name from manga. Her name is Jeha, and she wants her to be called Jeha from now on. The next problem was his appearance. He stood up and showed his belly, revealing a patch of hairless skin that had been shaved. He was not happy about this kind of thing. This was unavoidable when she was a cat, hence the vet she had to practice using an ultrasound device. Other than that, it was only fair to her. As a cat, she also contributes to the cost of food, and it offended Jeha with this statement, claiming that she had helped keep this house livable by ridding it of wandering spirits. Now that Kim Ah-yeong thought about the rent being unbelievably cheap, and the house being so much friendlier after she bought this house, Ed then spoke of the most important thing, was how the doctor could be so cruel to have him castrated. Ed almost cried saying it. Then he stood up awkwardly and tried to walk away, pretending that he was thirsty and needed water. But Jeha knew the truth, that he was only using her for training, and she was the first animal he ever had. While operating on it, he knew that Ah-yeong had made the wrong cut. He also apologized with a pat on the head. This was his first time operating alone. Ah-yeong immediately fell to his knees and apologized to Jeha. He didn't know he had heard all that. Jeha was worried for the owner. He was a mythical beast that had fallen by mistake, but it was even easier for humans to become corrupted. In this world, she warns him that now he is bathed in danho water. He had to be careful all the time. The doctor was surprised to hear his cat was worried about him, especially when she cut the cherries, even though she was annoyed about it. Jeha admitted that she was still the owner. This made Kim Ah-yeong filled with joy, and she hugged her cat tightly. A few days later, the doctor met Chung-ah, the blue dragon, again. He performed surgery on one of his 5th brothers named Chung-un, and he is the 5th son of the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. The surgery appeared to be in his mouth, and his sister stood on the sidelines to give Kim Ah-yeong support. Kim Ah-yeong started pulling on one of the dragon's teeth, and started pulling with all her strength. The dragon was in great pain, and wanted this to end. Brother tells him to just shut up if he doesn't get into a fight. Nothing like this had ever happened. The doctor wipes his head. Here he is actually trying to pull out a dragon's tooth. That itself took a while, but he finally succeeded and collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. This is not something a human should do. Chung-ah helped her and thanked the doctor for the great job she did. Kim Ah-yeong took off her mask and told the patient that if he came back with a broken tooth again, he would treat her without any anesthetic as punishment. Chung-un, who is now in human form, turns around explaining that that's how dragons always get into fights and get hurt. He was a bit difficult to understand and had a list of getting his teeth extracted. Doctors worry about prescribing antibiotics and painkillers. He felt like he didn't have the necessary dose, and a regular dose wouldn't even make an effect. Chung-un then tries to act tough, claiming that he doesn't need anything but a doctor, knowing he will regret saying that. He recommended that they meet again tomorrow so he could check on her progress and recovery. He should also have the medicine. At that time, Kim Ah-yeong re-entered the animal hospital. After taking a shower, even though he could still smell dragon blood on him, he was greeted by his employees gossiping in the corner. One of them is getting married. Her partner proposed yesterday. Because of this, she needs to prepare for the wedding. So she quit, and this will be her last day. This news comes as a big shock to our protagonist. It was the last thing he expected to hear when he got home. He lay in his bed contemplating how he was going to find a replacement vet technician. Jeha drew closer and wondered what was wrong. He was also at an age where he should think about starting a family. He couldn't live forever just by himself. On the side, Kim Ah-yeong threw a pillow at Jeha and frustrated him. She sounds like her mother. He jokes if he really wants to start a family, then he should go and find her a handsome and rich man. As he said it, he had a great idea. Jeha will have to go and find him a replacement vet if his cat can find a mythical beast or monster that can do the job of a veterinary technician. Then he wouldn't have to fend for himself while taking care of the mythical beasts. Jae-ha started pacing around the room he owned. Someone in mind, but he wondered if they could adjust properly for the new environment. He asked the owner if the gender of the thing wasn't actually, it would be even better if it was a boy, because there will be many things that need strength. He was surprised he thought of someone. Jae-ha was getting ready to go outside. Kim Ah-yeong was worried that it was also dangerous for her to go out with a cat's body. However, she convinced him that he was the great king of the mountain, and he had snuck out many times. While clawing at the door, she demands that he stop grumbling and opens it, asking her to be wary of cars and mousetraps, and not just eat random stuff from the street. The next day, Kim Ah-yeong arrived at the animal hospital. Her cat didn't come back last night, and she didn't know where she ran. Hope he's safe outside. At the hospital, she saw a strange man in a greatcoat sitting blocking the exit. From the coat, Jae-ha jumped towards its owner. He was so worried and happy to see her okay. The cat had brought him as many technician candidates as he wanted. He turned to the man he was with and ordered the man to introduce himself to his new boss. The man looked awkward and disheveled, with messy and strange hair. The device around his neck is called Choi-ji-yoon. He didn't even look like a mythical beast, he looked in rags, like a cat drifter telling Kim Ah-yeong not to judge people based on appearances alone. He may not be a mythical beast, but he's no ordinary human either. Kim Ah-yeong decided to get on with things and introduced herself. He offers his hand for her to shake, but Ji-yoon just leaves it. He awkwardly put his hands down. Feeling a little awkward, she thought it would be better if she washed and changed her clothes before they had their job interview. She reveals that she has no money, and these are the only clothes she has. Kim Ah-yeong actually saw her cat. She brought a man from the street. She decided to trust her cat and handed the man her secret card so he could get dressed and get cleaned up. It wasn't long before the interview took place. The doctor reckoned he must have gotten the gist of everything from his cat. He needs a new vet technician who can help him with the mythical beasts. Ji-yoon got it. Her face is much cleaner now, and she even got a new haircut. She looks so good that Kim Ah-yeong started blushing, thinking it must be worth spending all that money on her. Since he didn't have a resume, he started asking personal questions so he could learn more. His name is Ji-yoon, and he is 21 years old. Her birthday is August 6th, and she has never worked as a vet before. He also doesn't have an address because he doesn't have a home. Kim Ah-yeong was taken aback by this surprise, who didn't really expect him to be homeless. She would feel terrible making him sleep in the clinic, and there was no way she could let a grown man into her house. He stared at her in deep thought, wondering what he should do about the housing situation. All he quickly remembered was the gold bar that the Phoenix had given him. If he found a place to live, he was willing to pay for a deposit. It was a good investment if he could help treat the mythical beasts. Ji-yoon had a smile on her face. She'd love to work here if they were willing to hire someone like her. He wasted no time. The doctor issues a work contract and appoints in places for him to sign. Jae-ha is concerned about this. He shouldn't just sign it. Meanwhile, the cat just wonders how hard his owner plans to work his friend. They both ignored his worries. They immediately head to the housing agency to find a place for Ji-yoon to move into today. They managed to find somewhere. Kim Ah-yeong checked closely but quickly to make sure it was a good place, and she bought it. They sat down after a long day of drinking, place not bad for the last minute. She asks if he usually likes this, or just because they just met. The guy still doesn't speak and just nods his head while sipping his drink, and suddenly he spit out his drink. When the doctor asked how she and her cat knew each other, Jae-ha looked serious and answered questions. For him to vaguely say that the two of them ended up randomly knowing each other, Ah-yeong thought this was a stupid answer. Ji-yoon wipes the drink from his mouth and prepares to answer the question honestly, realizing that he won't be able to keep the secret from his new boss. He trembled and stuttered until he finally spat out the truth. He's no ordinary human. He is a werewolf. Hearing this, Kim Ah-yeong screamed in shock, unable to believe her own ears. Ji-yoon apologized if it scared her, but it was the first time she had ever told anyone that she was a werewolf. Which is exactly how it sounds. Even though he is currently in his human form, during the full moon, he transforms into a large wolf. Fortunately tonight, the moon is not full. He's safe to be around. Usually in human form, he's completely harmless. For the doctor, his cat, he wanted a mythical beast or a monster, but he bought her a werewolf. Everything that Jae-ha hid behind the chair legs. He was just trying to help his friends and owners with their problems. Kim Ah-yeong held her head in apology for being so scared. He just felt as though he was tricked. It was probably fine during the summer, when it's daytime again, but ever in winter the sun sets quite early. He wanted to know what he would do then, if it was okay his boss could take half a day. So he won't work when the moon is full. He was still worried, even though he always heard that werewolves attacked people. When he said this, Ji-yoon was nervous, and sweat dripped down his cheeks. The cat says he's no longer a danger to people, and this is something he can vouch for. The werewolf hangs his head, embarrassed at how much trouble he's caused. With just the feeling the doctor gave him 1 month, if he could get through 1 month without incident, then they could continue working together. He is grateful for this, and promises to work hard and not cause trouble. Kim Ah-yeong came home with her cat after a long day. Her new employee is now a werewolf. Crazy things keep happening today. A werewolf from Western mythology, and he's never heard of anything in Korea. Jae-ha explained that there was a long time ago when Korea first started accepting Western culture. So far, new technology is not the only thing. There are other things besides just werewolves in Korea. Many creatures that people see as fairy tales. Kim Ah-yeong wondered how her cat managed to befriend a werewolf. There was an awkward pause in the car. It happened when he was still the great Western Mountain King. There was a werewolf who started hunting once he arrived in his land. At the time, a young couple living at the bottom of the mountain were the only survivors. When Ji-yoon arrives, it is too late, and the young couple has been hunted down, and their 5-year-old son bitten by a werewolf is still alive. Despite being seriously injured, this child grew up, and that was Ji-yoon. Jae-ha had heard the range of werewolf rumors, so he already knew what would happen if someone got bitten by one of them. He felt guilty knowing that he had failed in his responsibility as king of the mountain, so he took the child. He knew very well what this child's life was like. He must live months past before Ji-yoon changed for the first time. Luckily, since he was still a child, he wasn't too strong. Jae-ha had to take him into the mountains. Rush to calm him once a month when the full moon comes. He will repeat this, picking up the child from the village and taking it to the mountains. Even though Jae-ha tried his best, Ji-yoon ended up being really scared. Himself and his own body in the end, he isolated himself completely from the outside world. As he grew older, he also became stronger. And it's actually because of that's why he's now sealed in the form of a cat. It's because of Ji-yoon. Kim Ah-yeong was confused about the reason. Didn't Ed say he became a cat because he killed humans? How to get in touch with Ji-yoon? The cat explains that it was when Ji-yoon was 15 that he challenged her for the first time. During this battle, Jae-ha was injured. Around that time, he gradually grew weaker, partly due to age. But that was also because the mountain had been destroyed by humans back then. 4 years ago, on a full moon, Ji-yoon managed to escape from the mountains. He made it all the way back to the village and started cattle hunting. However, the next month his target changed and he started hunting humans, causing everyone in the village to run from terror. The werewolf's eyes glowed orange and its fangs were sharp. Ordinary humans didn't stand a chance at that time. But Jae-ha survived everyone who had been bitten by the werewolf. He had started to change. He didn't want others to suffer with the werewolf curse, so he started to take it. Recalling the brutal scene that happened back then, villagers and police got involved. They were cornered. Jae-ha forced him to the edge of a cliff with no other choice. It's here where he breaks the taboo. He charged forward and attacked any humans who tried to harm him. Ah-yeong comforts the cat by giving him a head pat as he tells this heartbreaking story. The person who stopped the rampage and turned him into a cat is an exorcist. He was so strong that Jae-ha couldn't even believe he was human. An exorcist tells Jae-ha and Ji-yoon to go find a priest in a nearby small village who can deal with werewolves. At first they were both disliked by the priest, and chased away many times, even getting water poured over their heads. Since Jae-ha was now a cat, they were both desperate for help, so they kept coming back and clinging to the priest. In the end they won, and he decided to help. The priest melts the church's silver candle and silver cutlery to make an artifact seal, and as long as he wears this artifact around his neck, Ji-yoon is able to maintain his consciousness even while he transforms during the full moon. It was not an ordinary necklace that she was wearing, but a powerful magical item made by melting sacred items, as there is no reason for our protagonist to be worried. Ji-yoon is safe to be around a while, and he wasn't in a situation where he would be in danger. Ah-yeong and Jae-ha finished their long journey, went home, and went to sleep. So much has happened today. Even though Ah-yeong has trouble sleeping, she doesn't know her cat and her new employee. What a tragic thing if she knew she wouldn't be so rude and afraid of him. Previously, he decided that he would treat Ji-yoon well when he starts work tomorrow to make up for everything. He does just this, and the next day at work he apologizes, saying they should both be friends and work hard together. They can heal mythical beasts and make all the piles of money that come with him being now officially a veterinary technician. He will call her Nurse Ji-yoon from now on. The other employees at the hospital hanging out with him also wondered how that Kim Ah-yeong had found the handsome technician. On the first day by Ji-yoon has done well with all the tasks assigned to him. He was passionately trying to learn, and he had them shocking eyes. Maybe it's because he's a werewolf, but he's also really strong, and all the other animals become docile in his presence, which makes the vet's job easier to do. Only the other employees who were with them left for a while, leaving Ji-yoon alone with Kim Ah-yeong. The doctor used this opportunity to hold the nurse's hand and prick it with a blood test kit. This test is used to detect heartworms, which is a type of parasite. It is commonly found in canines because a werewolf is technically a dog. He thought it would be best if he took precautions. The test came back negative, even though she put him on some preventative medicine just in case he was taking this medicine. He then goes to his bag and starts rummaging through it, until he turns around with a needle with something in it that is clearly ready to stick it into Ji-yoon. She was cowering desperately, wanting to know what he was trying to do to her with all these drugs. He assured her that this was a misunderstanding. The needle-only rabies vaccine there has been a rare case of rabies, even in this town, so it's important that he gets this vaccine. Since he did, he slept outside like a beast until this moment. Ji-yoon didn't want him, and resisted as much as he could, but Kim Ah-yeong was persistent and forced her arm trying to find a vein to get him inside. He stopped when the dragon siblings Chung-ah and Chung-un walked in and saw the sight that looked suspicious. The doctor started to explain to her that this was not what they thought it was. It's not some kind of suspicious experiment, just a vaccination. He came close, knowing that a doctor would never do something bad like that. He was only here to ask his brother for medicine. Kim Ah-yeong handed the medicine to Chun-un, who was grumpy because her face was still puffy from yesterday. He kept everything off in the background while his sister started asking the doctor weird questions. He wanted to know if she liked the idea of an axe or spear or maybe even a mace the best. He thought of making a weapon from his brother's old teeth and using it as a payment weapon made from dragon's teeth. It was really overwhelming, and it could be important for Kim Ah-yeong to carry around if she ever encountered a scary monster or something. He should have won his 2 guns for self-defense and peace of mind, especially when working with werewolves. Kim Ah-yeong tried to refuse Chung-ah's gift. She didn't need a handgun today. And even if he had one, he wouldn't know how to use it. Chung-ah tries to convince him by saying that she can teach him. However, his doctor insisted he only wanted cash payments, and Chung-un calls him an idiot. Weapons that have been crafted from dragon teeth cannot be bought with money and are priceless. The doctor threatens Chung-un for calling him an idiot. If he wasn't careful, he would take the rest of the medicine away. When werewolf Ji-yoon joins in on the conversation and points out that a short sword might be the best weapon to make. The doctor only sighed now that even his own employees were trying to convince him that this is a good idea. While they were discussing things, the hospital door opened. It was another employee who had returned. It seemed that he was worried, and in a hurry to say something had come up. It's not clear what he's talking about, but it seems important. Kim Ah-yeong asked what was wrong and what had appeared. That's when the employee explained that he saw something he described as a ghostly leg. After hearing this, everyone had impressed faces on their faces. Here she is dealing with mythical beasts, while this woman is still obsessed with ghosts after becoming able to see ghosts and monsters. Kim Ah-yeong has been observing them for the past few weeks. She has noticed that there are spirits all over her clinic. Footmen usually just hang around in the operating room and do no harm. Besides that, it looks like she was found out by him. To his surprise, his employee could actually see ghosts because he was just an ordinary human being, without any special powers, which he informed him that he had nothing to fear. Because there are many ghosts around, so there is no need to cause such a thing. Scenes like a man might look scary, but he didn't cause any trouble. This confuses the woman, who wonders how she knows a harmless man's feet. Kim Ah-yeong reveals Kim Ah-yeong that she can see ghosts too. Hearing him say this so casually obviously frightened the employees and made the werewolves and dragons very nervous. They didn't want to do it. Their world opened up. He couldn't just blurt out something like that. You can see how shocked the employees are. Kim Ah-yeong saw no problem. So what if she could see a ghost? There was much more unbelievable. Thing of ghosts in this hospital. The beasts shook their heads rapidly, while the woman's mouth opened, curious to know what he meant by her. The doctor awkwardly clears his throat and says there are a few ghosts in the clinic, but none of them are all that dangerous, so there's no need to be afraid. Employees don't stop with their questions. It's only been a few days since Kim Ah-yeong talked about how she doesn't believe in ghosts here yet. He was sure that it was real. Did something happen? He said nothing. If not suspicious, he pushed his employees away. He is doing well, so he can now return to his duties. As soon as he came out of the room, the doctor turned to beasts. Why couldn't he reveal their identity? He doesn't like keeping secrets from himself. These employees, because humans cannot be trusted if they know their brand identity, it is a good opportunity. They will try to take advantage. Kim Ah-yeong was irritated if that was the case. Then why did they tell her about their identity? The dragons looked at each other nervously, and sweat dripped down their cheeks. After being treated, Chung-ah actually followed the doctor for a few days. He apologized, but she didn't believe him at first, and wanted to make sure their secret was safe. If the doctor turns out to be a bad person, he plans to erase his memory, or deal with him using a different method. For the werewolf, the cat Jae-ha told him he could trust the doctor. If anyone else found out about his true identity, he would definitely be hunted down. The mythical beasts were worshipped in the past, but time has changed them. They could end up locked in a zoo as endangered animals, or even worse, being dissected and experimented on. Kim Ah-yeong understood the seriousness of the situation. Now she promised to keep them a safe secret. She shyly raises her hand if it's okay with the doctor. She wants to take half day next week because full moon is coming and she doesn't want to work. It happens so unexpectedly fast. He asks Ji-yoon if he can see what he looks like as a wolf. The werewolf was dumbfounded by this request. Mentioned that he thought it was out of his mind to want to see something like that up close. But the doctors will have to work with him from now on, and he never knows what might happen around a werewolf. As dangerous as it was, he couldn't think about it. He was on the payroll. The only reason he hired Ji-yoon was because the cat told him he wasn't a werewolf, as a responsibility to go to the doctor. He still has doubts. The werewolf realized he would. Had to show his true form to prove he was safe. If this is going to happen, then Chung-ah wants to be there too. He was quite familiar with the evil nature of werewolves, so if something were to happen, then he would be able to protect the doctor. The two of them could come and watch him transform on a full moon night. It didn't take long for a week to pass, and everyone headed over to the werewolf and rang the bell in his apartment. Just 5 minutes from the clinic, the dragon Chung-eun also arrives. He is told there will be something fun to watch. Her sister reveals that even though she is rude, she is actually here because she is also worried about the doctor. He was a little awkward when everyone left, inside and just sitting waiting for something to happen. Kim Ah-yeong was shocked to see him change at the house. He expected her to be deep in the forest or some other secluded place. That's what Ji-yoon used to do when he was homeless. But now that he has a place to live, he can do it here. After this short conversation, everyone sat back down in silence. This lasted 30 minutes, and everyone got a bit bored and sleepy. An hour later, Ji-yoon finally got up from the floor, and everyone thought that was going to happen, but he just asked if it was okay for her to change in the bathroom. He was embarrassed and asked that no one should enter. As it did, he rushed inside and closed the door behind him. Jae-ha explained that changing is a painfully difficult process. There wouldn't even be a good word to describe it. It was more like torturous. It felt as if the organs were being twisted. Inside let out loud moans and screams could be heard coming from within the bathroom. They continued for a while. The doctor got up the nerve to speak up, asking if everything was okay there. Even though there was no answer, There was only an eerie silence. Everyone nervously appeared around the corner and waited in anticipation. The silence was finally broken by the squeak of the bathroom door opening. The werewolves asked that everyone stay calm and that they were not taken aback. By this time, everyone's guards were awake, and they promised not to be afraid. Kim Ah-yeong gulped down the water from her mouth, and sweat dripped down her face. He was really going to see a werewolf. The werewolf entered with those big orange eyes peeking through the crack in the door. Did he really have to come out after waiting for so long? The annoyed doctor screams for him to do it. Just out of sight, one can see dark, furry feet stepping out into the light, and the rest of it follows Ji-yoon awkwardly to her feet, and werewolf form with her arms crossed over her chest. Its fur is gray and white, with a silver collar still around its neck. There were 3 stunned spectators, even though their eyes saw something far more shocking than human. The common wolves who look down at their feet see that Ji-yoon is wearing a pair of goofy pants with love hearts of bunnies and carrots. If she transforms into jeans, they get too tight, so she needs something stretchy. Everyone laughed at the hilarious sight that wasn't even a little scary. Those pants really kill all the tension. What the werewolf was wearing was bunny pajamas. It was too cute. Ji-yoon was embarrassed. He asked all those people please stop laughing at him. Doctor calms down and wipes tears from her. He approached the wolf with him a lot, asking if he could touch it. First Yoon hesitated, though he let it happen in the end, and the doctor stroked his head. The dragons responded by what they saw. Looks like Ji-yoon controlled his body better than they expected. The artifact necklace around her neck must be strong, so they shouldn't have to worry about anything going wrong. Chung-ah apologizes for doubting the wolf. Kim Ah-yeong accepted his apology, and the two shook hands. It was even a healthy moment, even though the wolf's hands were too big. At this point, they were interrupted when the apartment doorbell rang, and everyone turned to look. The door kept ringing, and they panicked. Ji-yoon is not expecting visitors tonight. The dragon hid the wolf, who pushed him into the cupboard and tried his best to force the door shut. While they were doing this, the doctor went to open the door. An old woman with glasses and a red sweater. He is the owner. Here, and asked if they had a dog in the apartment. He must have heard a dog growling and demanded to see which young man lived here. He lied to say that he had only been out for a few minutes, but the landlord turned inside to have a look. She's Jaeha's cat, and she doesn't like her explicit no pets rule. Kim Ah-yeong tried to defuse the situation. It was actually her cat, and they visited her. The owners don't have to worry, they will leave soon. However, the lady kept shouting, even visits are not allowed to bring animals. And he should tell the tenant when he comes back that there must be no pets under any circumstances. It's a new day. People wake up early to go to work and start their work today. Inside the animal hospital, Ji-yoon is flipping through a textbook, trying her best to memorize all of its pages and information. He was clearly having a hard time, even though Kim Ah-yeong was observing him closely with a smile on his face. She's the one who gave him the textbook. For a while he thought it would be better if Ji-yoon took this opportunity to continue his education. As his employee, Ji-yoon is willing to do whatever he asks, and he will become more educated. If that's what he needs, but it's not. The doctor explains that Ji-yoon is still young. He doesn't want his lack of education to become a hindrance in the future, if there's anything he wants to do. There was nothing else for him to do, even though he wanted to stay working at the clinic and not want to go anywhere else. Ah-yeong understands he doesn't want her to go anywhere else either, but we never know what might happen, and it's always good to be prepared looking to the future. The young man, he wonders why he wants him to work here. In the animal hospital, it's so bad anyway. Ji-yoon is a little reluctant to reveal the truth, but does it anyway. Even though it was unintentional, he once injured a human in his werewolf form. He knew because Jaeha told him. When did he change back even just a little? He wished he could repent for his sins by doing a job where he helped to save lives. He wants to become a doctor like our protagonist. She asked that he let her continue working here, even though it was flattered to hear this. Kim Ah-yeong was in disbelief. He really knows what that means. Being a veterinarian is not always such a noble profession. This is a field where sometimes he needs to pick up live animals. Depends on financial factors. He couldn't bring himself to tell her this. Instead, she tells him that everyone has it, the right place for them, and everyone has clothes that suit them specifically. There's no reason for her to try and be like him. There are many other different jobs where he can save lives, like doctor or human rights activist. If werewolves want to save more lives, it's important that he broaden his horizons as much as possible. While he can do Yoon touched by this speech, he looks at Doctor with admiration and appreciation that he cared so much about his future. Kim Ah-yeong admitted that her speech was a bit too grandiose. His task today was to go and pick up some more educational books to study. When he was Kim, Ah-yeong went to pay a visit to the dragon Chungun to check how his teeth were. It healed faster than he expected. Because of this, he removed a lot of stitches, so he should be fine now. To leave while he's in Chunun's mouth. His sister almost peeked over the doctor's shoulder as if she wanted to say something. Noticing this, he put his hands behind his back and a childish voice leaked out. He took out his gift to the doctors for everything he had done for them. Scalpel made of dragon's teeth. They were made from the leftover materials he had after making a short sword. They were different from typical scalpels. As long as he properly sterilized them, they could be used without limit. Doctors aim to be grateful, but that's not the main attraction. Chung-ah takes out something wrapped in a blue blanket from her side and hands it over. Inside was a sword made of blue dragon teeth and glistening with light. But doctors don't know what to do with it. He swung it awkwardly in the air without a clue what he was doing. After thinking twice, he thought it would suit Ji-yoon. It is better that he has no use for such an extraordinary thing. Ji-yoon looked up from her textbook, stating that she was too. Chung-ah was a little gloomy after hearing this. He makes useless gifts that no one wants, makes doctors and nurses feel bad disrespecting his gifts. It wasn't that they didn't like him. It was just that they weren't martial artists. They didn't feel as though they deserved an extraordinary sword. If it was then, Chung-ah offered him to teach the doctor some swordsmanship. When he had some time, then Kim Ah-yeong could come to his house and they could get it. After the dragons left him, the doctor looked at the sword. He was sure he could find a use for it. Somehow, maybe he could use it as a knife to cut apples. He saw a werewolf maybe if he gave it to him and made him learn swordsmanship. He could be her bodyguard. Ji-yoon wonders what he's thinking and why he's looking at her like that. Kim Ah-yeong just laughed at how ridiculous the thought was. A few days later, she is walking home with passion in her step. Everything is going great so far. For the first time since opening the clinic is making a profit, and that's without taking on the mythical beast. Care counts. To celebrate, he had bought himself a chicken for his hard work. He would come home and take a hot shower, then eat this delicious crispy chicken followed up with a sip of cold beer. Today was a day only for her, and she would not involve herself with mythical beasts or monsters. As he said this, a white rabbit in a hat fell to the floor by his side. A white bunny with red eyes, he glanced sideways and realized he had jinxed himself. He tried to ignore it and went on acting like he saw nothing at all. However, the rabbit started screaming that it was dying and begging for help. There was no way he could ignore it now. He approached the creature and picked it up, seemingly battered and bruised, like something happened. He asked if it was okay and if it hurt, but the bunny just shivered and muttered, his stomach growling, indicating that he was hungry, and the doctor knew his plans for a peaceful day had been ruined. He took her back to her place and gave her some carrots. For he had seen the creature roaming around his clinic for a while now, but he had no idea what kind of mythical beast it was. The rabbit didn't answer him and continued munching on the carrots like there was no tomorrow. Meanwhile, Jaeha's cat digs through the takeout food box trying to get to the chicken. This is literally how his day goes. Bunny finishes his carrot and lets out a burp. He apologized for his manners. The rabbit is an animal that eats and poops non-stop, but he hasn't eaten in so long. He ended up behaving unsightly. He is a grim reaper from the underworld who is in charge of all the animal spirits in this city. His name is Jito. Even though he looks like an ordinary bunny person, he is an angel of death under the great King Yomer of the underworld. There, each of them, are countless grim reapers. Their own work among them is that Jito is given the task of gathering animal spirits and leading them to the underworld. Not only is there an afterlife, but there is another world known as Cha-an and Pai-an. Cha refers to anything in the world of living beings, including humans in the world. We know very well that Kim Ah-yeong is referring to another world that's not the world. Kim Ah-yeong is alive and has experienced and met many beings. Pa and anything that doesn't fit is good. Kim Ah-yeong mentioned ghosts wandering around without a home and tried the process. All of Kim Ah-yeong's headaches didn't make sense to her. The rabbit asked if she was a doctor who had become famous among the mythical beasts. The word recently on the street was that she was a very good doctor who put patients first, even daring to jump into the wandering ghost world alone. Kim Ah-yeong was flattered that she was so popular among the mythical beasts, and such rumors spread. About his judo that he really knows, even before he became famous, he has been observing it ever since he opened his hospital. The hospital is a place that often borders on life and death, so the Grim Reaper is always aware of everything. Ah-yeong assumed that he must be wearing a black robe. Since then, he was an angel of death, and it was true. Some of the youngsters wore black suits for the fit, but time and time again he found her in traditional attire. Clothing is more comfortable. If he's a real Grim Reaper, then surely he's capable of doing something about all the ghosts that roam around the hospital that frighten all the customers. What if they cause problems? Jito shook his head. Those things don't cause harm. The spirit has been wandering for a long time. Their names were long gone from the list of the dead, therefore they couldn't go to the underworld properly. Rabbit explains how the underworld and spirits work, but the doctor stops him, which he gives him a headache, and just has to get to the point to summarize. It was beyond his jurisdiction to mess with the ghosts that were inside the hospital grounds. Jito put his hat back on his head and got ready to leave. He regretted disturbing Kim Ah-yeong at that late hour. He wanted to repay him for not having anything of value. He took out a silver coin worth about 50 cents and handed it over, and another thing, he will be visiting his animal hospital in the near future. Kim Ah-yeong took this the wrong way, thinking that meant he would come, and Judo reassured her that it wasn't a problem. Her job is simply to lead spirits to the underworld. She has no involvement whatsoever in who lives and who dies. Kim Ah-yeong shook the rabbit like a maraca, demanding he tell her which of her patients would die. The rabbit slips from his tight grip and shoots towards the window. The only thing he can tell her is that it's an animal that frequents the hospital. Other than that, it's an absolute secret, dead or alive. No one should ever interfere with anyone else's life cycle. As a doctor, he should know that better than anyone. He jumped out the window while giving chase. However, he quickly disappeared. He left behind Kim Ah-yeong, who was thinking bad news and negative energy. Once she was kind enough to help him out. Meanwhile, Jae-ha is ready to dig his owner's cock. To not do anything unnecessary, the Grim Reaper is a cunning creature by nature. Nothing good could come from continuing their bad side. Kim Ah-yeong grabbed the chicken before he could take a bite. He bought it for himself, so he could enjoy the night. If he got Jae-ha's chicken, it would just bite his leg. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with a tiger eating chicken. Kim Ah-yeong shouted that she too was already fat and shouldn't gain any more weight. The two got into a fight. Ah-yeong was desperately trying to defend her cock while Jae-ha pounced on her. They hurled insults at each other. In the end, neither of them got any cock and fell to the floor. His leisurely night was interrupted by the arrival of the rabbit. He was fine before, and now he's not. How could he say something unpleasant like that? Kim Ah-yeong wanted to find out who would be the one to bite the dust at the hospital. He arrives at work the next day, sharp-eyed, and his first customer is a woman and her dog. This puppy's name is Popo. Poor Popo. He's passed out from diabetes and has been coming to the clinic since round 5. And once he's about to be vaccinated after completing the antibody test, Popo doesn't have to come back until it's time for him to get him neutered. The owner places the puppy on the floor. He also hopes that this is his last trip to the clinic, even though he keeps stuffing weird things in his mouth, so he hopes he doesn't get a stomachache or something. In the corner is an older woman with an older dog. He couldn't help but admire her. The younger puppy's running around. The dog can't run around. His name is Tonky Yorkshire Terrier, aged 15, who has a heart problem. He was hospitalized because of fluid buildup in his lungs caused by heart disease. Since then, he often visited the clinic. As for Tonky, he also has bad knees. Kim Ah-yeong asked the woman if she had ever given her dog a joint supplement. Of course, she had been feeding him for extra nutrition, and he refused to eat his food without it. Kim Ah-yeong thought that the dog ate even better than him. Her mother refused to send her any more side dishes. Then their conversation changed. The old woman praised Ji-yoon, who was very kind. Then Ah-yeong blurted out that he was really good at hiring people. Then the old woman said if she had a daughter of the same age as her, he would make the perfect bridegroom. Meanwhile, Ah-yeong's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the good condition of Popo and Tonky. Possible accidents can happen to Mochi or Sarangi. Mochi is a 2-year-old hamster. Regular half-year came to shave his front teeth. Sarangi is a cockatiel currently getting respiratory treatment first. All hamsters just have a short lifespan, and for a bird's respiratory disease it can be very fatal. Maybe that's what the rabbit was talking about. One of the two, now that the doctor thought about it, both of these patients were late visiting, he decided that he would call and check on them. But Jito the rabbit appeared behind. He made her jump in surprise. What he did was Kim Ah-yeong yelled at him for scaring him like that, and also demanded that he put down his pipe because smoking was not allowed in the hospital. He wondered why he was here. It is possible that one of his patients will die. Jito assures him that's not the case. There is no particular reason for his arrival. He just gathers some spirit beasts nearby and gets hungry. While passing by realizing he is here to eat, the doctor starts taking a bag of something from his clothes. Meanwhile, the rabbit holds out a brass coin for payment. It turns out that the contents of the bag is salt. He throws it at Jito and says there's nothing more fun than a Grim Reaper in a hospital. Jito jumped back, scared of this salt that had taken him by surprise. Whoever heard of the Grim Reaper being weak to salt but didn't expect it to actually come true? Jito sticking his tongue out and winking didn't really scare him, and he was just being playfully irritated with this doctor. The doctor started yelling at the stupid bunny, only stopping when the next patient came. Suddenly came a young man, a boy, and a mochi hamster. All he wants is to bring the hamster faster, but he can't do it for his busy school schedule because his teeth haven't been trimmed. He hasn't been able to eat properly the last 2 days. While the doctor examined the mochi, the Grim Reaper grinned at the hamster. Ah-yeong told him to leave. Luckily, the hamster wasn't sick. He was just a bit dehydrated, but other than that, he seemed fine. He was happy to hear that and came out of the clinic. He thanks the doctor for everything he did. He waved at him and the rabbit mirrored his movement in a joking manner. As soon as the door closed, Kim Ah-yeong pounced on Jito. The annoying bunny kept playing around and he was fed up. He finally grabbed him, but the rage stopped in its tracks when a loud slamming and banging sound came from outside. They wonder what's wrong, and when the werewolf enters, he says there has been an accident in front of the clinic. Car tire marks were visible on the road where the car skidded. Blood was splattered around the eerie silence following the car crash, and a woman's screams were heard. That's the dog's Popo. A crowd seemed to have gathered to see what was happening. Ji-yoon came out chasing the doctor who ran out first. There a woman knelt in the middle of the street with tears streaming down her face. A car suddenly appeared around a corner, hitting him and his dog Popo while they were trying to use the crosswalk. The woman only had a few scratches, but Popo appeared to be seriously injured. Luckily, he was still awake and conscious, and there didn't seem to be any external signs. Dr. Kim Ah-yeong took off his jacket and wrapped it around the puppy, offering words of encouragement and telling him to hold on a little longer. He needs to take Popo to the hospital now to find out if this accident has caused any serious damage. And the results came in that the first and second lower spinal vertebrae had been severed, and the left hip joint was dislocated. The Grim Reaper rabbit Jito was still in the hospital commenting on that. Kim Ah-yeong once told him to be quiet while he concentrated. He panicked a bit, even though deep down he knew this wasn't his first case. He just needed to calm down and do his job. Popo the owner is still in the waiting room, sitting in a dark corner hiding his face. Light entered the room when Kim Ah-yeong slid open the door to speak to him. He invited the woman into the office. The puppy's life is in no danger, but if he doesn't get surgery, he may become paralyzed. The woman assumes that this means the operation will let her walk again. Doesn't seem so sure he doesn't know. This hospital does not specialize in surgery. This type of surgery would be difficult. Even in a big hospital with surgery and physical therapy, there's a chance that Popo won't make a full recovery. There was a high chance she could end up wheelchair-bound for life. In a case like this, the medical bills and the amount of intense care needed was extreme. Popo's owner was crying. He was whimpering, knowing that something was wrong. Everything just hurts. The owner apologized for that. He was at a loss for words, but if he wanted to attempt surgery, it would be impossible for it to be done here. He will need to go to a university animal hospital or animal medical center, as the cost of surgery and physical therapy accounts for it can reach several thousands of dollars. And the worst possibility can break 5 digits. All the owner asked for was help. This is too difficult a choice. Kim Ah-yeong couldn't help it. The decision must be taken entirely by the guardian. Kim Ah-yeong knew it didn't matter what choice was made. The owner ended up regretting it later, and he didn't want to take responsibility for it. His owner watched him intently as the puppy Popo poked his head out of the blanket and started licking his fingers, encouraging him to pet her soft and adorable head. He just needed a little time to think. Doctor understands and leaves the room. Close the door behind. The werewolf told him that Popo just got his 5th vaccination. The werewolf hesitantly asked if the puppy would go. Well, Kim Ah-yeong had done everything she could do. All that remains is to wait for the guardian's decision. Jito, the Grim Reaper, stood around for a while, passing by the time finally the woman came out of the room. She didn't want to put Popo to sleep. He couldn't do that to his puppies. He had heard about the animal hospital specializing in rehabilitation. He could go, and he would come up with the money somehow. When he first bought the house, he was already expecting to have to pay a lot of medical bills. If anything happened to her, the doctors had recommendations for where the woman could go. For surgery, it's in Seoul, and it will take some time to get there, so he needs to get going soon. He can also borrow one of their vehicles for the trip. Kim Ah-yeong placed the little one inside and gave him some headlines, encouraging him to stay strong. He also encouraged the owner to do the same if he was anxious. Then Popo would know. Dogs are smart creatures, and their owners nod. Trying to be brave, then he comes out of the animal hospital and starts his long journey to Seoul. After that, this whole situation, Ji-yoon let out a sigh and fell to his knees. Kim Ah-yeong urged him to get up. There was still a lot of pet food that needed to be arranged, but the werewolves weren't feeling too well. Kim Ah-yeong felt nothing after what just happened. Kim Ah-yeong placed her hand on his shoulder. Is he just used to it? Because this is the kind of thing that happens a lot in his career. He saw someone dead or injured is never easy. They fell silent, where the doctor let Ji-yoon grieve for a while. He then made a light-hearted joke. What? Lucky that Popo will live. It was then that the Grim Reaper spoke up, whether they really thought this would be a happy ending for Popo and his owner. Maybe the owner is just prolonging the pup's pain and suffering by keeping him alive. This makes the doctor angry that what Jito says is true, but it could be the opposite, or maybe even a bit of both. They are not in a position to judge the owner's decision not to be euthanized. It didn't matter if his decision was based on human greed, or to make himself feel better. The owner chooses what he thinks is best for Popo's happiness. The rest is up to the universe to decide. The phone at the reception rings like a siren, so Ji-yoon answers it. What he did know turned out to be even more bad news. The Yorkshire Terrier tank passed out after having a seizure. The owner immediately took him in to get him checked and asked if the dog would be okay. Tonki's blood test results seem fine, but has him having seizures without any obvious signs, meaning there must be something wrong with the nervous system given the dog's age. It may even become a tumor, which means surgery may be needed. The owner is concerned, even though Tonki is 15 years old and has a heart problem. What if he can't afford surgery? Are there any other options? The doctor explained that he could take medication, but this would not cure the dog and would only stop the seizures. The owner saw Tonki and wondered what he should do. Ji-yoon watches him nervously from behind. No easy decision. This kind of situation, even if they do surgery and find the cause of the convulsions, it will still be difficult to treat in old age. Tonki seemed like there was nothing he could do. Worried that Tonki is too old to go through the stress of surgery, plus the bills are too much for him to pay. The understanding doctor offered to prepare a prescription to help treat the dog's seizures with medication. He went to the back and started digging through the shelves and the werewolves moving around the bottles. He approached and asked the doctor if he was sure he didn't need to run any more tests. He must be lying. If seizures can usually be stopped with medication, they just had to hope that it would work for Tonki. He's having a hard time. Dealing with all the traumatic things that have happened today, she can't quite tell what's true. No matter how much he thought about it, there was no way to communicate with the animals to see what they wanted. If he knew what the animals wanted, he wouldn't be a vet. He would be an animal communicator. Instead, owners do the best they can for their pets in their own way. Just keeping pets alive isn't always the right answer. Quality of life is also important. He knew it was a difficult thing to handle. He assures Ji-yoon that it's normal for him to feel so desperate. Tonki walked behind them. Kim Ah-yeong turned around to look at him and jokingly bit him. She asked what she thought of the situation. Tonki didn't know how to answer and just stared back with a goofy face, tongue hanging out and head tilted sideways, lying down. Then he turned to see Jito, who was still in the hospital. Of course, he should be able to communicate with the dog and ask for its opinion. However, the Grim Reaper shook his head. It's against the rules. 1 month has passed since this busy day at the animal hospital. During this time, Popo has had surgery after being hit by a car, and it turned out to be successful. However, there doesn't seem to be much progress with his rehabilitation, and he has difficulty moving, for Tonki is on medication. The seizures still occurred once or twice per week, although recently his condition has become much more stable. Today at the animal hospital there was some bitter news that the Mochi hamster has died and his owner has returned. Hamster had died when students woke up. He just found his pet. It seems it's too late. If it's okay with the doctor, he wants to cremate that hamster. He skimmed so much, Kim Ah-yeongi. Kim Ah-yeong didn't want to make the students uncomfortable and agreed to do the cremation. Mochi lived longer than expected. The kid asks if the doctor thinks Mochi is happy with it as long as he lives. Kim Ah-yeong glanced inside the crate to see a Mochi ghost biting some of her sunflower seeds. Cheeks still chubby, and a ghostly full belly looking up with a happy smile letting out a happy squeak. Kim Ah-yeong replied, "It must be Mochi fine now. He could eat all the sunflower seeds he wanted." The student cried badly enough and handed over his pet's body to the doctor. "Please, can he take good care of her till the end?" Suddenly the Grim Reaper rabbit lifts his pipe in the air and smashes it into the ground, creating an explosion, and summons a wooden door with a red and blue symbol on it. It looks like a Pepsi logo only. Kim Ah-yeong could see this explosion, and she looked up at the flashing light to see what was happening at the door with the Pepsi logo on it. It seems to be the gateway to the afterlife. Jito is standing by the entrance waiting to take the ghost away. Hamster Mochi threw the crate and jumped on the floor towards the door directly to the Grim Reaper. The doctor turned to the student if there were any last words he wanted to say to his hamster. The boy sobbed and choked on his words. He hoped that the two would meet again one day. Mochi turned to take another look at its owner. His smile brightened and his squeaked expectantly, then he barged through the door, and he is ready to start his next journey. Moments later, the doctor sits down next to Jito as he bites into a carrot. They sit in silence until the doctor asks a curious question what door he called earlier. Jito explains that it is a door leading to the underworld that leads to a place called Samda-chun, a mythological river that the dead must cross before they arrive in the underworld. If the dead manage to cross the river, they can meet the king of the afterlife. He wanted to know if he had to cross this river too, or only for the animals. Jito nods and eats a carrot. In an open doorway for everyone, even when they die, he's an animal that will die in an animal hospital. It's the Mochi hamster he's been taking care of. Kim Ah-yeong took that to mean the Grim Reaper would be gone. Now there was no need for him to be here anymore. Jito earnestly chewed again, remaining incredibly silent. He didn't know when it was time for him to leave. The doctor looked confused by the answer the rabbit gave. Then Jito's faintness just faded away, his body slowly disappearing in a flash of light, leaving Kim Ah-yeong sitting alone. Wondering what he might mean, is he should really get hold of an enchantment or something to stop the Grim Reaper. The idiot came back again. Suddenly the door swung open. Kim Ah-yeong came to see who had entered her hospital. It was the owner of the Tonki carrying the Yorkshire Terrier inside him on the arm. He had another seizure, and this time it was longer. Doctors rush, it really happened again. Maybe they should try to increase the dose of medicine for him. The owner stopped him unnecessarily. He didn't come for medicine more. The reason he was here was because he wanted to put Tonki to sleep. The medication had no effect and the dog had started screaming in pain. He didn't want her to suffer anymore. Everyone stood around crying, while Kim Ah-yeong tried to convince them not to do it. They had controlled the situation well until now, so they had to try increasing the dosage first, but the family had decided after giving the situation a lot of thought. Euthanasia is what is best. He picked it up. Look at Tonki in his owner's arms. The dog was drooling and looked in bad shape in his old age. Apparently it was really the end of life for him. He closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Okay, he will do what they want. private back room to start with the procedure. Kim Ah-yeong put Tonki on the table and gave him an anesthetic. Put up a good fight and can rest now. There are 2 steps to euthanize animals. First is to give them anesthesia, and second is to administer medication for this euthanization. Medication can be very painful, which is why it is important to give the animal the first anesthetic the family gets together, wiping the tears from their faces. Tonki needn't have worried because they were here and everything would be fine. His mother and older brother are here. He's a good boy and needs to rest. He starts giving the drug for euthanization, slowly pressing on the needle as the contents of the needle. The owner seemed to be crying. The owner grows stronger. The doctor took Tonki's pulse 9:45 and he has now passed away. Just in time, Jito the Grim Reaper appears in his leather cap and black uniform, and he opened the door to the underworld for him to enter. The door creaked open, and a ray of light entered. The family hugged Tonki tightly. They are very, very sorry. Hopefully he can forgive them for doing this. Tonki's ghost approaches his owner to get one last look at him. He rubbed his head against it. It's okay, Mom. She knows she is loved a lot. He loves her. He didn't blame anyone, and in fact felt much better now. He doesn't need to suffer pain. He then turned to his older brothers, thanking them for always playing with him and keeping him company. Tonki wiggled his way into the doorway. The door spun around before heading into the light, telling his mother he loved him. He actually saw this, even bringing Kim Ah-yeong to tears. The owner was surprised to see him crying with them. They thanked him for taking care of Tonki these past years, that they had come here, and no amount of money could repay the kindness. He squinted his eyes, trying to hide his emotions. He said it was only in his duties. He knew it was something for years he had to do it. Things are like this with animals, and it always broke her heart, even though she acted like she was fine. He always wondered if animals hated him. He was always haunted by this question until today, seeing Hamster Mochi and his dog Tonki. They both show nothing but unconditional love for humans. Even though they died, it was a beautiful thing. The love between humans and their pets is unmatched. Kim Ah-yeong, who was full of sobs and tears, looked at Jito and thanked him for showing her the beauty of the afterlife. The Grim Reaper nodded his head. All he did was deliver a message. It is her job, after all. Doctors smile. 2 pets died today, but they are in a better place. It was a bittersweet goodbye. A few days later, he was looking out the window while drinking a cup of coffee, while the birds were singing and the sun was shining brightly. Ji-yoon is mopping the floor while commenting that today they have no customers at all. Kim Ah-yeong agreed. That was when the phone started ringing, startling the 2 of them, and making Kim Ah-yeong spill her coffee. He hesitantly picks it up, wondering who it could be. Then a scream came over the phone that deafened the doctor's ears. That's Popo, the owner of Popo said if he had stood up. Popo is finally on his feet, and he will even be able to walk quite fast. Kim Ah-yeong couldn't believe this was such big news. Vet life is truly a roller coaster ride. Human ups and downs coexist with their pets. Every day they laugh, cry, contemplate, and suffer together. Believe that happiness will be at the end of it all. Kim Ah-yeong's job as a veterinarian helps them. Through that journey he might not become a god, but he could at least guide them at the crossroads of life and death. Today Kim Ah-yeong is out. He strolled through the crowded streets. People flocked out on the very crowded streets. He walks around, but he hasn't been outside the hospital for so long. He was already exhausted by everyone around him. That's when he noticed something strange. It was a girl with unusually white hair. He seems lost. He wondered what the difference was between an internet cafe and a karaoke room. He was looking down, staring, saw that this girl had a bushy tail that was wagging as she walked. He is also a legendary beast. Kim Ah-yeong rushed after him and rushed towards him, then quietly whispered that his tail had been spotted. He did that to make sure not to attract the attention of other passers-by. Then Kim Ah-yeong told the girl to be careful from now on, and Kim Ah-yeong hurriedly left and said goodbye. He didn't want to get caught up in some crazy otherworldly business. But instead of leaving, the white-haired girl continued to follow him. He really messed up by talking to her. Kim Ah-yeong confirmed that he was really being followed. With a sudden stop, the girl did the exact same thing, and when Kim Ah-yeong started walking again, the girl continued to follow, following a few steps behind every time. Feeling this was enough, Kim Ah-yeong turned around, demanding to know why she was being followed. The white-haired girl smiled, showing two sharp fangs in her mouth. He followed because Kim Ah-yeong smelled so good. It smelled so good. In fact, the girl felt as though something good would happen to her if she followed him. Her name is Yeonsi, a white fox demon. The white fox is training to become a human, that's why it has a unique tail. Kim Ah-yeong smacked her forehead and pulled her own hair in disbelief that something like this was actually happening again. He felt it was like déjà vu. Doing this means that Yeonsi is a mythical beast too. Yeonsi shook her head. Not strong enough to be considered a mythical beast just yet, but compared to ordinary foxes, her species could live a very long time. A very special life if they continue to build on their training. If their training lasts enough, they might turn into mythical beasts. It seems like the legendary nine-tailed fox Yeonsi has no interest in any of that, even though her only desire is to become human. He promised that once he turns 18, he can finally come and visit the human world. Today is his 18th birthday, which is why he is here. Foxes are considered fully grown adults when they reach this age. Kim Ah-yeong would also leave. If that was the case, then she should enjoy her time in the human world. He is busy and doesn't have time to play any games. Yeonsi clutched her jacket tightly, clueless, and couldn't go around alone in the human world. It was too confusing. Then he told her to go home because the human world is dangerous, full of bullies harassing young girls who don't know any better. They will love it. The world is not safe for foxes. Don't like this, he replied while screaming like a child. He went berserk. He waited 18 years for this and demanded that Kim Ah-yeong help him. Finally, he stopped screaming and looked up with puppy dog eyes. Asking Kim Ah-yeong to help and assist him, he promised he would like to use these fox marbles to attract the doctor's attention. Can he really want anything he wants? Yeonsi emphasized. Then that his mind started to wander from the phoenix, he got a gold bullion as payment, and from the dragon he must have some rare dragon tooth kit. Showing this fox around would be worth it. He quickly changed the tempo of the song and with a beaming smile asked what the fox wanted to do first. They can go and watch a movie. Yeonsi doesn't know what movie is, but it sounds like fun. He jumped in joy that he now had a tour guide in this world. They go to the cinema to watch something, where the fox stuffs his face with popcorn and cola. He was having fun and screaming at the movie screen, and the excitement caused everyone who was trying to watch the movie to be annoyed. It annoyed Kim Ah-yeong to despair. Tried to reassure him that he thought it would be easier if they just sat back and watched a movie, but he was wrong. By the time the credits rolled, that most people had already left. After having a horrible time, Kim Ah-yeong was exhausted after spending the entire time trying to keep this fox under control. Yeonsi couldn't believe how amazing it was. All these people flew right before his eyes. This cola drink is also cool. Every time he drank it, it would make him burp. Back in his anger, Kim Ah-yeong asked the fox if he was satisfied now. This must be the end of his journey. It was then that Yeonsi's stomach started rumbling, echoing throughout the empty room. He was hungry and hadn't eaten a proper meal all day, so he wanted something tasty, so the doctor took him to a nearby restaurant to eat here. He scoffed at the many leaning plates and let go of the others. He's burping now. He was so full he could barely get up. Kim Ah-yeong's patience was starting to wear thin. He literally spent all his money. As soon as this fox could eat food, it would not be time for him to return home now. Yeonsi leaned back on the chair. It's only one day, and it's not enough. He wanted to play more, but he had no place to sleep. He asked if maybe he could sleep over the doctor's bed. He immediately said no. His house isn't some kind of indoor hotel. It just pisses off the fox, throwing another tantrum, screaming and causing a scene in the restaurant, demanding that the doctor let him sleep. Everyone around them started staring and whispering among themselves, trying to figure out what all the fuss was about. About if Ah-yeong doesn't let Yeonsi stay beyond that, he'll tell everyone here that he's a kidnapper. If that happens, then the police will come and take him away. Yeonsi grinned mischievously. Kim Ah-yeong's face was very angry. He slammed his fist on the table. Fine, he can sleep at his place, but only until tomorrow. It was a heavy night, but finally the morning sun bloomed and shone from the bedroom window. Kim Ah-yeong woke up and yawned widely, stretching her hands in the air. He looked at his cat Jae-ha and the fox sleeping close to each other. That bastard really was sleeping soundly. Kim Ah-yeong could barely even sleep properly because of all the fuss they made last time. Fight night, He remembered what happened yesterday after he left the restaurant with the fox. They were heading to catch the train, as Yeonsi continued to play with everything he passed. Kim Ah-yeong got frustrated and turned around to tell him to stop playing. That's when a demon appeared right in front of the doctor. It was big and black with red patches on its body. Yeonsi jumped in front of Kim Ah-yeong, telling him not to be afraid, she can handle this weak little ghost. Yeonsi breathed blue foxfire from her mouth, causing the creature to flee in fear. He stood with his hands on his hips, proud that he could clear any area of harm, though he felt strange that the Grim Reaper being in charge of this area, for being careless to allow a wandering soul to stroll around so boldly. Finally, he stops cowering and asks what on earth just happened when Yeonsi explains that they were attacked by a demon and she burned them with foxfire. When he was truly an extraordinary child. Now he is in his bed. The next day, trying to think if that actually happened or not, he never found out it was possible to burn demons. His pet cat rolls over on his back and releases a sweet fart in the morning while still asleep. Kim Ah-yeong pulled the covers up to wake them up. He screams that they should stop sleeping now. Yeonsi must return home now. The fox changed back to his human form. In a puff of smoke, he had to go back. Couldn't they play again today? Kim Ah-yeong couldn't. Because he has to go to work and earn money. In the human world, making money is more important than anything else. He is happy to inform the fox that he is a veterinarian who spends his time helping animals. Yeonsi's eyes light up, praising the doctor. That's why the doctor has such a good smell. Smells like animal fur that has been out in the sun all day. Yeonsi was jumping up and down with great joy. He wanted to go to the animal hospital. He also begged the doctor to let him come. Then he asked her about the fox marbles. With a smile, of course, the fox will grant his wish. Then they both got ready to go to the veterinary clinic, while the cat was lying on the floor talking. Was he the only one left here? At the hospital, Choi Ji-yoon hid behind Kim Ah-yeong. Behind him, Ji-yoon said that he wanted the girl to stay away from him. Then Yeonsi said that there is a good smell coming from Ji-yoon too. Meanwhile, Ji-yoon, who was already sweating, was still hiding behind Kim Ah-yeong. Who is that girl? Ji-yoon asked him. Then Ah-yeong explained that the girl was a white fox, Gumiho. Ji-yoon was surprised to hear that. She came up behind him and introduced herself, which made him jump. Her name is Yeonsi, and she is a white fox. Ji-yoon backs into a corner while Yeonsi asks if she's a wolf. He tries to deny it by saying he is only human, but the fox can smell him. If he's only human, then why does he smell like a wolf? Someone walked through the front door and everyone turned around to see who it was. Another employee who worked here too became curious about who this girl was. Why is she in their clinic? Yeonsi spoke up once again, introducing herself. She was a Gumiho. Before she could finish the sentence, Kim Ah-yeong rushed over and covered her mouth. He couldn't just walk away telling everyone he was a fox. Kim Ah-yeong explained to her employees that Yeonsi was her cousin. She just wanted to see where she worked, so they got together. It's school holidays, and he has the day off. While he explains, Yeonsi, in the background, interrupts Ji-yoon, wanting to see the book she's reading. Kim Ah-yeong nervously pushed her employee out of their room, asking him to make her a cup of tea. He assures his employee that his cousin likes to make fun of other people, that's why he acts so wildly. The employee named Hannah seemed suspicious, though she didn't inquire further. A while later, Kim Ah-yeong was tired. He had spent most of the day trying to come up with excuses for Yeonsi, telling his employees that the reason his hair was the way it was because he wanted to be a K-pop idol, so he dyed it. He notices that now the clinic is strangely quiet, so he checks the fox and werewolf. Yeonsi is reading a math textbook. It shocks her all humans have to study this in school, she can't think of it. The doctor approaches and snatches the book out of his hands. Even if they don't go to school, humans still have to study it to get the job they want. He handed the book back to Ji-yoon, tells the fox to stop bothering him so he can study in peace. Then, Yeonsi got a headache. Suddenly he thought if he becomes human, then he has to learn everything all over again. Of course, the doctor told him that life as human is just as hard, if not harder than animals. So if he changes his mind, he should just go back home now. For a moment, the fox remained still and trembled. Then it raised its head and jumped on Ji-yoon. He wants to study too. He wanted to learn everything that humans learn. Ji-yoon desperately looks at Ah-yeong, who begs him to save her from this girl. The doctor ignored her request and looked away. He was sorry, but he had a lot of work to finish. Leaving him alone with his problem foxes to deal with, now the doctor spends all day locked inside his office. He wondered how the werewolves and foxes would carry on without him. He checked his phone. He saw it was almost closed today. The day really just flew by. Finally, he came out of his office to take a look at the two. He asked Yeonsi when she would come home. By now, surely people should start worrying about him. Now Yeonsi agrees it's time for her to come back. They needn't have worried, though, that he would make it to come back tomorrow so he could study some more. For a moment, Kim Ah-yeong was glad he was gone, except this fox would really keep coming back. He arrived for the 3rd day in a row, 5th day in a row, and again for the 7th day in a row, always coming to the hospital to study. This annoys the doctor. How long will she survive coming and bothering him when he has work? Employee Hannah spoke up recently. She found it odd, because Yeonsi said she was on vacation, but today is Tuesday. Then Ah-yeong quickly said that it was Friday. Ah-yeong said maybe Hannah was tired, so she told her to go home and rest. Hannah declines the offer, despite insisting she is fine. Kim Ah-yeong nervously laughed, knowing that Hannah wasn't going crazy being able to use the school holidays as an excuse for Yeonsi showing up at the hospital on the 1st day. But after showing up 7 days straight, the employees started to get very suspicious. Foxo Yeonsi puts Hannah under a spell that causes her to get it all. The date mixes up, and the reason it's Friday is because it's actually Friday. The employee already had no ideas. Kim Ah-yeong was already getting fed up with the whole situation she was in. Yeonsi has been a week since she promised a wish using fox marbles. At which the fox let out a devilish smile. He smirked. He said he would give the doctor one if he played with him, but he never specified how long they had to play. The doctor folded his hands. So did he actually get the wish or not? Yeonsi coughed loudly, insisting that she would grant him one. The doctor noticed that Yeonsi looked sick. She didn't know what was wrong. He just woke up today and his nose is all runny. He's been like that ever since he had a cough and cold. He had never been sick in his previous life. As a wish, if he really didn't believe his promise to give the fox marbles now. However, it couldn't be something like wishing for all the gold in the world. Kim Ah-yeong was bothered by this. He planned to ask for 400 million, so he can pay off his student loans. He was still coughing. The fox explained that as soon as he gave the same thing, he wanted other humans and got in trouble for disrupting the economy. Kim Ah-yeong scratched her chin in deep thought. It was hard for him to choose just one wish because there were so many choices. Finally, he decided he wanted to bring the hospital out of its deficit. Yeonsi wiped the snot from her nose, knowing what she meant by this. Kim Ah-yeong explaining that she wanted her hospital to make a lot of money, which means she needed a lot of customers like that. He can still get money from his wish without asking for it directly. The fox liked the sound of this idea, and it didn't sound like it was too hard to do anything. He waved his hand. Streaks of golden light in the air surrounded his body, and gusts of wind swirled around the room. In his palm appeared a ball of energy starting to build stronger and stronger. He stretched his arms in the air, releasing energy, trying to summon his fox marbles. Yoon watches in anticipation, but nothing happens, and the light show is followed by an awkward pause of silence. That was really what Kim Ah-yeong thought. But far more extreme than that. The fox bent down and took a deep breath. That shouldn't have happened. He thought there might be something wrong with him before he could say another word. He fell to the floor in front of the werewolf and the doctor. Seeing Yeonsi suddenly unconscious made Kim Ah-yeong and Choi Ji-yoon wonder, what is causing it pain? Then they rushed to do tests on him. When the tests came back, they revealed something terrible. He has a disease known as canine distemper. It was a contagious disease that attacked the canine's gastrointestinal, respiratory, and nervous systems. They had to put it into contact because their bodies were full of viruses. In the human world, they need to prepare a room for him, so he's quarantined. They have to get an IV started for him. And there's also a possibility that Ji-yoon might have caught him since he hooked up with Yeonsi. He needs a lot to quarantine. Also, doctors aren't sure if distemper can affect werewolves, but prevention is better than cure. He checked the fox's temperature, looked at the chart. Kim Ah-yeong couldn't believe he hadn't noticed before he led Ji-yoon and Yeonsi to a private room where they should stay for a while. He was sorry it had to be like this. He bought some books for Ji-yoon so he could keep studying during his lockdown. They both look at the fox and see his condition looks like it will be some time before he wakes up. Ah-yeong should probably sleep in the clinic tonight. This temperament is serious. The viral disease has a low probability of survival in the world, but once it enters the dog's body, the death rate soars. Not only that, but once it enters the nervous system, it can cause symptoms very similar to those of a seizure, which can have long-lasting effects. In dogs, sometimes when it gets nervous, the system goes dormant for a while until it relapses years later. Because it was dangerous, Kim Ah-yeong used to wonder if it was worth trying to treat this case. But he knew as long as there was a sick animal in front of him, he would have to find a way to help him somehow. Kim Ah-yeong fell asleep for quite some time. Then he was awakened by the sounds of rustling and whispering. He shot from his seat, wondering how long he had been out. A panicked Yeonsi wants to know if there is something wrong with him and why he is in the cage. Ji-yoon explains the situation. He has distemper, and that it will be fine until he gets better. He should try and get more sleep. The doctor entered. It would take at least a few days, and it was so serious, he would likely be in a lot of pain. Yeonsi looked up with tears in her eyes, and a trembling voice. He will die here. Kim Ah-yeong looked down at the floor. The fox that she has to call their guardian should be here now, but they usually communicate using their fox marbles, but Yeonsi can't summon hers now, because she's very weak, maybe because she's sick. He cried thinking that he would die. She was very sorry she bothered everyone so much and caused so much trouble. The doctor calmed down the fox. They caught the virus in its early stages, so they would be able to give her proper treatment. Suddenly, the clinic door swings open, alerting everyone inside. The doctor was sure that he locked it when he went outside to check. A ghost appeared from the ceiling. Kim Ah-yeong and Ji-yoon heard something big and vicious walking towards them. Yeonsi heard that too, and trembled. There was something here, and it was coming right at them. It was a rotten creature, turning a black corner, staring at Ah-yeong with blood-red eyes and long legs. It was truly a threatening sight. Kim Ah-yeong could react. It stretched her long arms forward to get hold of him. He lifted her up by the throat and slammed her against the wall. Ji-yoon watches in fright, calling for the doctor. The creature looked deep into Kim Ah-yeong's eyes, demanding that he give her the fox marbles. He recalled the dragon-tooth sword kept close to him. Ji-yoon rushes to get him so he can help, however it stretches out his other arm, gripping a leg. The werewolf stopped him in his tracks. If he could just reach a little further, he would be able to get his hands on the sword. In a draw right in front of him, but he was being dragged away. That's when Yeonsi jumped out of her cage and grabbed the sword, then threw the sword at Ji-yoon. He caught it in his hands and thanked the fox for helping him. He took out a dragon-tooth sword blade and swiped at the evil black one. The creature that had invaded their clinic let out such a terrifying growl. It stabbed its body into pieces. Then there was the sound of something falling to the ground. It was Kim Ah-yeong. Ji-yoon immediately rushes over with the fox and sword in hand, asking if she's all right. That doctor got his breath back. He clutched his throat and coughed. He replied that he was fine, but had no idea what it was about. The fox trembled in the werewolf's arms. It is a demon, or some people prefer to call it an evil spirit. The evil spirit is chasing Yeonsi's fox marbles. If he stayed here, he would put everyone in danger. The fox tells everyone to run away, and he will stay behind to distract the demon. Just run away temporarily, and they'll be back soon. Most likely, they will succeed. The angrier Kim Ah-yeong didn't want to leave. Whoever was behind, though, if the creature had escaped, then they could all escape together, even though he had never been chased by a demon before, so he had no idea where he should go. In the end, they decided to run to the middle of the road. Definitely, if they were on a busy street, they would make it harder to find everything. Kim Ah-yeong decided not to take the car. He chose the day where he was attacked by evil spirits, after running for a while, when Ji-yoon suddenly stopped them. He felt strange about something. He asked the doctor if he could feel it too. It must be late at night, but the streets are quiet. This path felt strange too, even though they had walked while they still had not reached the fork. Yeonsi spoke up, telling them that they were in an illusion. If they didn't catch him who created the illusion, or if they didn't find a way to escape, they would be trapped in here forever. Everyone turned around when they heard the same cynical footsteps. It approached them. They heard before turning around. They saw the same evil spirit. Although the taller lot in the clearing again demands that they give the fox marbles. Ji-yoon decides to be a hero. He gives the fox to the doctor to hold it. They both have to go and hide in a safe place. Let him advance. With a blue dragon-tooth sword in hand, he didn't look like many warriors, but at least he had faith. He thrust out the sword, advancing once more through the beast and causing it to crumble into a puddle on the floor. Kim Ah-yeong was surprised that the evil spirit was much weaker than he thought. It was then that he saw that it was not dead, and his hands began to reappear from the puddles on the floor. He tries to warn Ji-yoon, but it's too late. That hand grabs him and slams him against the wall brutally. The supervising doctor doesn't know what to do. At this rate, Ji-yoon will get more and more hurt. Meanwhile, the white fox girl was crying. Kim Ah-yeong thought of doing something with several options. Kim Ah-yeong bent down and picked up a rock from the ground, clenching it tightly in her fist. He did throw the stone right away from the evil spirit. The demon turned to look inside him. Kim Ah-yeong was completely flabbergasted. It really is. He just throws a pebble with 2 extra hands. The beast grabs the doctor and the fox, then squeezes them like a ketchup bottle and pulls them close. His mouth opens wide, and as they get closer, they feel the heat of his breath. They started crying, not wanting to die. Kim Ah-yeong cried for her parents like she was going to die before them. At least he won't have to pay back the loan he borrowed for the clinic. He closed his eyes and waited for his inevitable death tears to roll down his cheeks as he wondered that would even gather his body. After he was gone, a blonde woman appeared out of nowhere, and here he dashed forward in a streak of light. Through the many arm lights, the evil spirit stumbled backwards while trying to regenerate. Ah-yeong, Yeonsi, and Ji-yoon were in his grip and hit the floor. The mysterious blonde woman is holding the fox. He came to check on her only to find her being beaten by a mere demon. It turns out that the woman is the fox's older sister, and her name is Hong-si. She has short blonde hair and a white shirt and red skirt. Hong-si jumped from a nearby streetlight while asking the doctor if she was okay. He's a little flustered, but he's fine, looking around looking for Ji-yoon, who's groaning on the floor. Not far from them, after shouting, Yeonsi rushed to comfort him, completely ignoring her big sister who just saved their lives. The demons leave, but they are still trapped here in the illusion. Kim Ah-yeong asks Hong-si how did this happen, and the reason they are still trapped is because the demon isn't the one who created this illusion. It isn't strong enough. There must be someone else nearby. Sister Fox fills her power with yellow lightning strikes and pops between her fists. He then swiped his hand forward, releasing this bolt of lightning, and threw it forward. It was so powerful that it attacked the boundaries of the illusions which trapped them and destroyed them. The illusion shattered like a window crack. After doing this, Hong-si saw something move to her side. It was all that was left of the demon he had just defeated. He was trying to escape, and he wasn't going to just let it go. He was going to replenish his strength again. Kim Ah-yeong grabbed his arm to stop him, but Yeonsi was in a critical state. Hong-si's powers might be needed to help save her, so the doctor asks her to come with him to the hospital. On the floor, the fox was exhausted, and moaning. His face was sickly red, and he could barely breathe properly. His older sister bows, concerned what is wrong with him. The doctor advised Hong-si not to touch foxes, as she has a contagious disease called distemper in dogs. He knew they were both sisters, so assumed that must mean something. Hong-si is a fox too. Hong-si took this moment, standing up, and introduced herself properly. Even though she may look like this now, she is actually a 9-tailed fox. Then Kim Ah-yeong gestured for him to stay away from Yeonsi because she was also a fox. There was a chance he could catch a disease, so he had to keep his distance at all times. Hong-si became flustered. She waited. The doctor became even more shocked after discovering that he was a mythical beast. However, Kim Ah-yeong had met so many, from dragons to phoenix, was that she wasn't bothered anymore. She didn't care if the woman was a 9-tailed fox or a firefox. Hong-si scratched his chin when he heard what the doctor was talking about. Kim Ah-yeong didn't care about all the mythical worlds anymore now. Right now he was busy shaking Ji-yoon to wake him up. It was urgent that they get to the hospital. Now they are in a hurry because of the dying fox over there. They have to get to the hospital as fast as they can. The situation is not looking too good. This is a very evil disease, and even if they can treat it, there is a chance it could reappear again in the future. After knowing this belongs to Yeonsi's older sister, worrying for the two. They only have each other. She begs the doctor please find a way to save her. Doctors want to save her. She really wants to, but there are limits to what she can do. He can do, and some things come out of him, Yeonsi hears this conversation from inside her cage and calls her older sister. She apologizes for everything. He was sorry he didn't listen when his sister tried to give him advice, and he was sorry he always caused so much trouble. The werewolf Ji-yu then reaches into his pocket telling him to stop acting like he's going to die. She took out a red ribbon hairpin and placed it on the fox's head. This made Yeonsi touched by this. Though it didn't make him stronger, it just made him cry more, begging for his life. Thought the doctor would be better if Hong-si got vaccinated just for safety. To get this, he transformed into his 9-tailed fox form and was done in seconds. After that, the 9-tailed fox revealed that it was all his fault because he didn't really like the human world. However, Yeonsi was always so obsessed with it. Hong-si felt like she should have tried to stop her sister from trying to become human if she had never come to the human world. Neither of these would have happened. Kim Ah-yeong shocked the 9-tailed fox calmly. She shouldn't say such things. It's been a week now that Kim Ah-yeong and Yeonsi are having fun here, going to the movies and back to the hospital every day to study math. She even saved Kim Ah-yeong from a demon while they were trying to catch a train. Yeonsi is a strong girl, and doctors are confident she will overcome this disease soon. Hong-si, the 9-tailed fox, lowered her head in a knot. She knew it was true, but she still felt guilty that the doctor was trying to divert her mind by asking her questions. He wanted to know where the demonic beast had come from. Previously, Hong-si described the creature as a yokai, who might try to take his sister's fox marbles to increase her strength. When foxes go through training, they keep their powers into themselves. But fox marbles, when foxes lose or take their marbles, they go back to being normal foxes, unable to carry any kind of divine power. Doctors worry that this creature escaped, and they didn't catch it. Something really evil is roaming around this neighborhood all the time. If it wasn't for the help of the 9-tailed fox, they probably would. He had died inside that illusion. Until now, our protagonist hasn't had much trouble with all the ghosts and spirits he has seen, but now he realizes how stupid he is. He will definitely be more vigilant in the future, as they all gather inside the clinic talking about crimes. Meanwhile, outside there appeared a black figure floating excitedly. He stood outside, laughing threateningly, as if he had made a plan for someday. Kim Ah-yeong finally found the time to go home. Her cat, who wasn't happy because she hasn't been able to drink fresh water in ages since she hasn't returned. Kim Ah-yeong walked right past him. He was aiming for his bed. He had already shown her cat how to turn on the faucet so she could get her own water. Jae-ha insists that he doesn't like water, even though he only likes the special water that was delivered to him in a clean bowl by the owner. He climbed into his comfortable bed. It had been 3 full days since he came home. He asked his cat. He only gave him 5 minutes of rest. An hour passed and she was still sleeping, which made Jae-ha even more annoyed because of this lazy woman. He said it was only 5 minutes, but he was still asleep. When she's cold, her phone is on, ringing in her bag across the room. Jae-ha tried to nudge his owner to coax him awake, but it didn't work, and the ringtone was so loud it hurt his ears. Surely they should stop calling after a while. If no one answers, she decides to just answer the phone and hangs up immediately so it's quiet and can stop. However, after answering, a booming voice shouted, which made him jump. Something was wrong then. An employee named Hannah explained that they were in big trouble. The fire broke out at the hospital. Fortunately, no one was injured because no one was inside. The fire started to spread in the treatment room. Kim Ah-yeong thought that was where most of the equipment was stored, so the hospital was completely destroyed. Hannah called Kim Ah-yeong, asking her to come as soon as possible. Jae-ha hung up the phone instantly. Without saying anything, he jumped on the bed and slapped his owner in the face a few times. He needs to wake up. There was a fire in the hospital. According to the news, no one was hurt, because there was nobody. Hearing this, Kim Ah-yeong jumped off the bed and grabbed her coat. Fox Yeonsi and werewolf Ji-yoon should be inside. If they weren't there, then he needed to go and find them. An evil spirit might come and take it again. Jae-ha followed the doctor and jumped in the car with him. He tries to calm her down, but she just slams on the accelerator. How can she calm down at a time like this? He drives fast, worrying about Ji-yoon and Yeonsi where they are. Maybe if they're not in the hospital. Jae-ha already tried to trace their location, but the werewolf fainted, so he struggled. One thing for sure, he can say that this fire was caused by a yokai. He could feel his power, so they had to follow the trail. He started guiding the way to his owner, who was racing in his car. There was no way he wasn't going to let the demon get away with this. That was when a nine-tailed fox jumped out in front of the car, causing him to immediately hit the brakes. He was so distracted that he forgot to pay attention to the road. He was praying he didn't crash. When Hong-si jumped on the car and got in human form, he saw smoke coming from the hospital, and it came as fast as he could. They didn't have much time, so Kim Ah-yeong urged him to get in the car. They weren't sure where his sister was, and Jae-ha tries to trace their whereabouts. Currently, Hong-si stared at the cat in the front seat and was unimpressed. Jae-ha angrily turned around with his claws out. He wasn't an ordinary cat, so he shouldn't judge her so harshly. What they got was a short fight until Kim Ah-yeong told him to focus. He needed them to point the car in the direction with Jae-ha leading the way. He signaled when and where he should turn until they reached their destination. They parked in the middle of a football field, outside a building. If his senses were correct, then the yokai were there. They all got out of the car and rushed into the building. There was a loud noise coming from him that only worried them more. What's inside as they enter? They see Yeonsi and Ji-yoon lying on the floor, apparently unconscious with sword teeth. The blue sword dragon is lying beside Ji-yoon, who is with some blood splatters. They rushed out of the car and approached them. Ji-yoon, who fainted, woke up. He stumbled off the ground when he saw them running towards him. He screams they shouldn't come any closer. A giant appears in a crack in the floor with purple light, and yokai start to come out of it. The beast opened its ugliness and its mouth tried to eat it. Luckily, the nine-tailed fox used its strength to dodge the attack. She lifted the doctor and the cat into the air along with her yokai, laughing. He got a little closer, and he was about to swallow them whole. He used his powers to get it. Everyone on the other side of the room only made the devil happy for a moment. The fox marbles had come at him willingly. Yoon tells everyone that he is sorry. He tried his best, even though he was with Yeonsi. He couldn't stop the demon from taking his fox marbles. The doctor checked his wounds to see if he was okay. There was a lot of blood. Yeonsi was unconscious in his arms. She was still alive. The yokai may have mastered the marbles, but it hasn't completely absorbed them yet. If they can get them back, Hong-si quickly thinks things should be fine. The beast's feet were walking on the floor as it came closer. Hong-si quickly attacked with her strength. How dare this beast take the sister's marbles? He definitely didn't know who he was dealing with him launching a lightning strike that wrapped itself around the yokai's body tightly, like a rope restricting his threatening movements. While he continued to absorb the power from the nine-tailed fox's stolen marbles, he followed up his attack with the firefox, and he blew out blue flames which engulfed the evil spirit. But again he just laughed. The nine-tailed fox was much stronger than Hong-si. He was afraid of how this would just happen. He wasn't bothered by the attacks. It was like they weren't doing anything. The yokai went through a kind of metamorphosis transformation from a huge ghoul lump into something that resembled a human despite having 3 eyes and skin with green hair. He touched his new body carefully and smiled. This is exactly what he wanted. This was a complete body. His laughter grew stronger with a snap of his finger. He ordered Hong-si to kneel down. This was a spiritual order with no control. Hong-si fell to her knees and slammed her fist into the ground. For some reason she couldn't go against his orders. Meanwhile, the cats watched in confusion. There was no other way. Only with marbles does the demon fox become stronger than the nine-tailed fox. Beast snapped his finger again, using another spiritual command to summon the fox. Blue flames surrounded Hong-si, who tried her best to protect herself with the golden force field, but she was getting weaker and weaker. When Jae-ha realized what was happening, they needed to find out the name of this demon in order to cast a spiritual command. All you need to know is the name of the opponent. That's why that demon was able to defeat Hong-si. If they could find out his name, then he would be able to compete with his strength. The werewolves talked about how they would go find something like a way out. Hong-si shouted from inside her force field. She can help them look into her memories. Someone has to enter it. The awareness to find them no matter who went. But it was dangerous. If something went wrong there, they could be completely swallowed up. The rest of the group looked at each other nervously. Ji-yoon gritted his teeth and got the courage to volunteer here. However, Kim Ah-yeong refused to let him have the blue dragon-tooth sword, so he had to stay here protecting everyone. He decided he would be the one go and start walking down the stairs. Ji-yoon tried to prevent him. It was too dangerous, but Kim Ah-yeong had made up her mind. She turned around and asked Ji-yoon as her boss. She should stay here and keep everyone safe while she was gone. The doctor approached Hong-si, who was using his power. He let out a blue flame, and Hong-si tries to connect access between Kim Ah-yeong and the memories of the evil spirit. He warns her that within these memories there is a time limit. She must learn his name before she leaves. Kim Ah-yeong felt like she was flying up into the air until she started sinking down, almost like he was underwater. Finally, he slipped into the darkness. When he next opened his eyes, he found himself in an unusual marketplace in the countryside. He found this strange, but immediately got up and got to work. He needed to focus and find some sort of quick clue. The streets were littered with stalls and people nearby passing by. He heard an old radio blaring through several speakers. It was from a bedraggled man in a cap. He pushed a cart and limped along the road. His messy hair was hiding his face. Kim Ah-yeong, watching him closely, noticed that the man's leg was apparently amputated. Suddenly the legless man was forced and pushed to the ground, and when suddenly a large truck drove towards him. The truck honked its horn, but there was nothing it could do. Kim Ah-yeong screamed, but it was no use. The man had no legs, so he couldn't easily run away. Then the truck hit him. The truck crashed right into the poor guy and created a loud bang. It was heard by everyone in the market. They gathered and whispered among the crowd. They gossip about a legless man who was hit by a truck. Kim Ah-yeong pushed through the crowd to take a look who was lying on the road. He was confused, but no one else was. It seemed they were all just watching from afar. Kim Ah-yeong asked herself why no one helped her. Suddenly Kim Ah-yeong felt a chill run down her body, beads of sweat running down her body as she looked at the man under the truck. He looked back at her. It makes direct eye contact. He called Kim Ah-yeong. Kim Ah-yeong suddenly froze and couldn't move when she saw the man lying on the road suddenly change. The man had 3 bright yellow eyes, staring at Kim Ah-yeong. Then around him, Kim Ah-yeong was stared at by a crowd of people with burning yellow eyes. The yokai told him how dare Kim Ah-yeong interfere with his business. By getting into his subconscious. Suddenly many black shadows approached Kim Ah-yeong. The black shadow completely engulfed his body. Kim Ah-yeong didn't even get a name yet. They completely engulfed his body. He couldn't go like this. He screamed for them to let him go, but they wouldn't. Their grip grew tighter until he was struggling to breathe before he knew he was back in reality. He was awakened by Ji-yoon. It looked like he was in danger, so he brought him back. Meanwhile, the battle between the 9-tailed fox and the yokai is still going on. The cat turned to its owner quickly. He asked what the name of the evil spirit was. Kim Ah-yeong shouted that she didn't know. He couldn't hear it. Then, Hong-si, who was struggling to resist the evil spirit's attack, she turned to Kim Ah-yeong and said, "Can she at least give them a hint of what she saw?" The doctor tried to remember when he was at a market in the countryside, and he saw a homeless person, and he was hit by a truck. He also has no legs. That's all useless information. So Kim Ah-yeong thought harder. Now that he thought about it, he was sure he heard someone say his name when people gathered and gossiped about him. They said a name that he tried to remember desperately. He found it difficult to remember. Finally, he remembered his name, Seo Gilju. His name was Seo Gilju. He was so sure that he had heard people call him by that name. Hong-si let out a smirk. He grinned. Now he could call out the yokai's name and order him to disappear. Hearing the order suddenly made Seo Gilju stop. He was furious, his 3 eyes narrowed and his moist mouth opened as he screamed, "How dare this little fellow, this girl, do this to him?" He turned to Kim Ah-yeong and tried to attack him with the firefox, but Hong-si stopped him. He gave him the order to disappear. Then Hong-si gave her blue fox fire attack. Then the evil spirit cried. He did not accept. Just now he has a complete limb. He couldn't just let it end like this. Then the evil spirit just disappeared. And the fox marble he stole fell to the floor and rolled forward. Choi Ji-yoon bent down to pick it up, and then put it back inside Yonsi. The white fox came back to its senses, and everyone rushed to him, wondering if he was okay. Hong-si was so happy to pick up her little sister and hug her tightly, so tight that she struggled to breathe. Kim Ah-yeong looked happy from afar. Her cat stood beside her, praising her actions. Kim Ah-yeong is quite amazing. He agreed, though he couldn't help but feel sorry for the now departed yokai. He couldn't escape from the car accident because of the disturbance in his leg. Because of this, he died in vain and held a deep grudge. This grudge changed. He became an evil spirit that he only wanted to fulfill his wish to get a complete body, even to the point of stealing fox marbles, even though in the end, he died in a cruel way. All are happy that everyone is safe now, except he is also feeling a bit melancholic, as well as his hospital is still on fire. What will he do? That Hong-si told him not to worry, it's because the hospital is on fire. As a result, the devil's power should be restored using the fox marble. Kim Ah-yeong rushed to thank him. He couldn't believe that he could actually do that. Hong-si felt that it didn't really matter. Instead, Hong-si should be the one thanking him. He was the one who saved his little sister. The doctor smiled after all that he really should go home to rest now. His body ached for a few moments. The next day the sun shone brightly. The condition of the animal hospital has been returned to normal. From outside the day looks pleasant with the sun shining brightly. But inside the hospital, Kim Ah-yeong felt sick because there was no examination today. No appointments, and they haven't sold anything on pet supplies yet. They have no business at all. Thanks to the wishes he got from Yeonsi, they got a lot, but customers coming to the clinic only lasted a moment. Business stopped in just 3 days. The clinic is full of useless souls instead of paying customers. Meanwhile, a werewolf and a white fox are in the waiting room. Yeonsi is fully recovered from her distemper. To celebrate this, Ji-yoon gave her a hairpin shaped like a flower. This made her happy how pretty she looks with it, even though she now has no use for anything else. The hairpin he gave her, so she tries to give it back, and puts it in her hair. When Ji-yoon refuses, she tries to force it. She causes a commotion, it's really loud. Kim Ah-yeong was coming outside his office screaming at them as he did this. Something fell from above and slapped him right in the face, out of nowhere after hitting his face. It fell to the floor, clutching his nose. The doctor looked over, wondering what could have made him surprised when he saw a head, but no body. It was still alive. Also, its red eyes flashed and made a sound like a squeak. Kim Ah-yeong screamed on top of her body and caught the attention of Ji-yoon and Yeonsi. He points to the floor where there is a rat head with no body, and it moves of its own accord at the front door, which swings open, and comes the Grim Reaper Jito, and asks if by chance they saw a rat head around here. Kim Ah-yeong was still screaming and hiding behind Ji-yoon. The Grim Reaper saw what he was looking for on the floor. The little imp had caused so much trouble. As it approached the head, it flew into the air and squeaked repeatedly. Then it started doing something crazy. It opened its mouth and started sucking out all the souls that were inside the hospital. It even swallowed up the ghost feet. The mice also gained the ability to grow a pair of legs and made it possible to run out of the hospital and onto the street. The Grim Reaper said that they should follow him, but Kim Ah-yeong was still so scared, and hiding behind the werewolves, there was no way he would get out. There's Yeonsi, on the other hand, excitedly reaching to hold the doctor. She says it'll be a fun little adventure. He dragged the doctor out the door and onto the street, chasing the rats and the Grim Reaper. The rat stuns quickly, and the others struggle to keep up. But not only that, but the rat grows in size, indicating it is getting nasty. Seeing this, Jito reached into the red bag he needed, and caught this thing as fast as he could. From inside the bag, he took out a strange fish-like creature he called Ahyoung. Creature is spinning rapidly on the floor in a circle. Jito instructs to go and send news of the situation they are in. The creature shot into the air and disappeared into nothingness. He doesn't know what to say. They continue to chase the mice, and Jito explains that creatures are whores. Kim Ah-yeong was acting as a messenger in the underworld. She only sent word for help. Kim Ah-yeong walked as fast as she could, but struggled to keep up, wondering who Jito had just asked to come over and help. That's when someone stepped over her head, causing her to fall to the ground. This person had the appearance of a human with long ponytail hair wearing a black suit. If looking closer, they have black eyes and white skin. They apologized for knocking over the doctor, but wasted no time running away. Kim Ah-yeong assumed that this must be the person Jito sent him to ask for help. That they slow him down, he can't run anymore, and has lost track of everyone. That's when he sees Ji-yoon and Yeonsi running back to him. What they need to get out of here. Now rats with human legs grow giant, twice as big as the buildings around. His bloodshot eyes looked down at the now reunited group. Jito was happy to see that the favor he asked for had appeared. He called the man in the black suit, Young Master Suwon. Suwon jumped in the air and slashed the mouse beast with the sword right below, in the middle of its face. The beast perished, and Suwon took out a jar from his jacket and he opened the lid while holding the jar. He collected all the black dust that had fallen from the dying rat. Suwon turned to greet Jito and smiled broadly. It had been a long time since he had seen his teacher, but he gestured to someone else. Jito rushed to introduce Suwon to everyone. Suwon shook hands with Kim Ah-yeong. He said that he was the legendary doctor of beasts, and Suwon had heard all the rumors about him. Suwon had heard this rumor going around. He apologized to Kim Ah-yeong for stepping on his head earlier. He is the angel of death. Also, he is responsible for eliminating all evil spirits in this area. This made those present a bit angry, so this was the man who had ignored all the evil spirits in this area. Yeonsi jumped forward and grabbed him like, what Grim Reaper does he think he is? Hence he almost died because of the demons in this area. Due to his negligence, Ji-yoon holds the white fox back, but he continues to ramble on. Does Suwon know what they have when passing through this area? It's been full of wandering spirits lately. Suwon asked everyone to please calm down and listen to what he said. He was attracting the others. A jar and opened the lid with bright lights shining, and smoke filled the air. Everyone was watching carefully, wondering what was going on, and what was Suwon's reason. As the smoke clears, a Doberman appears on the road. It's kind of fat and panting like it's out of breath. His name is Jinjin, and he's Suwon's mate, but a few days before he starts acting weird, he'll lie like this and won't move. The doctor cleared his throat as he commented on how overweight the dog was. He did this to Jinjin. Suwon assures the doctor that the Doberman isn't fat because he neglected him. Jinjin is his precious partner. After all his excuses, he hasn't been up to the task. The duty as an angel of death is because he has taken care of his partner. Suwon stood up, begging the doctor to ask for help and help him. Suwon explains that the Jinjin's job is to weaken evil spirits by sucking out their grudges. He must have eaten too much, and thus made him fat. However, Jinjin had grown up with a lifetime of eating the grudges of spirit. It didn't make any sense why she had become so overweight all of a sudden. He got a lot of practice too while chasing after the evil spirits. She was always running to be, and it was an important part of her life. But one day she just started to get lazy, and her body became like that. Kim Ah-yeong looked at the dog. We were about 10 years old, which was equivalent to 80 years of age in humans. Jinjin has lost his appetite and hasn't been eating much lately, but he is still gaining weight. Doctors assume that this could be related to her hormones. This Suwon has an expression of not understanding with not knowing what hormones are. Kim Ah-yeong explained that the dog might be sick. He then suggests doing a check in exchange for payment. He doesn't do any work for free, but he has no money. Kim Ah-yeong walked away, refusing to take care of a dog. Then dealing with hormone sickness can be very expensive, and she doesn't do it for free. He tried to stop her. They couldn't just leave Jinjin like this. He feels bad. Grim Reaper Jito spoke up if he didn't help them. Then eventually this area would become overwhelmed with evil spirits. The werewolf Ji-yoon agrees. It's bad enough that the Grim Reaper has to get back to work. Suwon promised that he would find a way to pay the doctor back somehow. If there was anything he could do, he would. The doctor insisted that he had said no, but Yeonsi nudged him and pointed at him at the animal hospital. It seemed like evil spirits had started to gather there, knowing that Kim Ah-yeong's helpless Jinjin turned to stone. There was no way he could work properly if all those things were hanging around. He turns to the Grim Reaper. Suwon believes he can pay for his medical expenses somehow. Suwon convinces him he can. As the old saying goes, those who show their mercy to the Grim Reaper will be rewarded handsomely one day. For example, one day when he is old and dying with his powers, he can add another 10 years to his life. This convinced Kim Ah-yeong to do the inspection. This person was truly more useful than him. Then they both agreed. He is willing to treat the Jinjin Doberman. Then they head for the hospital, and all the evil spirits are gathered inside, staring at Suwon, who is standing with his hands in his pockets like some sort of superhero. He warns the spirits to leave now, before things get out of his hands. The evil spirits cowered in fear of the Grim Reaper. Then they got away from the hospital and gave them room for everyone. Suwon shows his work, which seems so charismatic and cool. It didn't take long to check the Jinjin. Kim Ah-yeong thinks Dobermans have hypothyroidism. Everyone there doesn't know what it is. Doctors talk about it's called thyroid gland inside the neck, and it is not producing enough hormones. It is hormones secreted by thyroid, which creates a lot of heat and energy for the body. But when our body does not produce these hormones, the body gets drowsy, causing the patient to suffer from chronic fatigue. Suwon somewhat understood what the doctor was saying, and he looked up at the doctor asking if there is any solution to this problem. If Jinjin is given medicine, he should be able to recover his strength soon. But his weight is still a problem. If they leave him like this, it could cause other complications. It will take at least 6 months to lose weight, Jinjin. And those things should be built into the plan, such as a diet and regular exercise that doesn't put a strain on the joints, like swimming. Suwon realized something when his partner had not recovered. They wouldn't be able to eliminate the evil spirits together. Yancy spoke and raised her hand like a kid in class. He had a question if there was someone else who could track down the evil spirit. Then he didn't need to carry it with him. Did he turn to Yancy, the doctor he knew? Only the beast could track down the evil spirit. Kim Ah-yeong got an idea in her head. He knew exactly who the fox was talking about. It didn't take him long to return home and bring his cat to the clinic. He looked displeased even though he used to have no way he would do this. He was once a big beast in the mountains. How dare they ask him? The hounds of the kneeling Grim Reaper must have done this kind of work. This will be an opportunity for Jae-ha to atone for his past sins of hurting people. Werewolf Ji-yoon nodded in agreement. Jae-ha with tears in his eyes when he saw this. Even his own friend was on the doctor's side. So business is done. Suwon stretched out his hand towards the cat. He looked forward to them working together. Little did he know he would. He came to regret this statement. It had been 5 hours since the two of them had worked together, and Suwon was exhausted. He had carried Jae-ha around all day, and he was too heavy. The cat was offended by this statement. With the help of the Grim Reaper, he had managed to catch 10 evil spirits today. Suwon knows this is true, but it still bothers him. He has to take Jae-ha wherever they go. The whole reason they were hunting demons in the first place was because of that place. Suwon neglected his duties as an angel of death. Jae-ha said that he should take this as punishment while taking a walk on the street. They decided they had done enough work for the day to rest. However, the cat sensed something and jumped out of the crate. The cat has the ability to smell evil spirits, so he runs on the street, while Suwon tries his best to keep him from being attacked by the evil spirits. Time had passed until the sun began to set, and the sky turned orange. They continued walking down the street, looking for any traces of evil spirits. The Grim Reaper wasn't sure if they were in the right place. He didn't look at anything around. That was when they saw a cat-like figure playing around in some trash. Suwon said that it was just an ordinary cat, and not an evil spirit. But Jae-ha took a closer look and noticed the cat. The cat's paws looked strangely purple. It's definitely not an ordinary cat. And Jae-ha shouted to the Grim Reaper, who suddenly became alert. The cat turned into a wolf-like figure, wanting to pounce on the Grim Reaper, but Jae-ha jumped forward to offer protection. The evil spirit hissed loudly like a wolf. He paused and stared at the cat. Suwon took this opportunity to charge forward with his sword. He slashed the evil spirit in half. He sliced its lower half and upper body with a single sweep of his sword. The lower half shattered, but the upper half turned into a crow with large wings and black feathers. This crow flew away into the sky, worrying the Grim Reaper, and the cat was the evil spirit had escaped, and Jae-ha didn't think he could track it anymore. It looked like it was created by a mass of spirit beasts that all held extremely deep grudges. They both had a really bad feeling about this whole thing, about everything that was going on. Meanwhile, Kim Ah-yeong, who had just returned home, felt very tired. He was just about to come home from work. The empty streets surprised him today, but he didn't think anything of it. Car sirens tried to warn him. Even he saw the accident, but Ah-yeong was too tired to pay attention. He daydreams about his lovely bed and comes home feasting on chickens. Edward, his cat, was probably having a hard day too, so he thought it would be fun to give him some extra snacks. He was driving the car with a smile on his face, thinking about the nice, comfortable house. It made him happy. Just thinking about it. Maybe he was thinking about it a little too much, though, and forgot to pay attention to the road. He saw the purple wolf-like spirit from earlier, and it was walking right in front of his car. Desperate not to run him over, his car swerves off the road. He gasped in shock. His car tires screeched on the road, and he completely lost control of the steering wheel, which caused him to crash upon impact. He was confused, and the world spun. Blood dripped from his forehead. Kim Ah-yeong shook and squeezed the steering wheel. Why did these unfortunate events keep happening to him? Kim Ah-yeong, who had an accident, was brought to the hospital. After he recovered from the crash, Kim Ah-yeong's vision faded from dark to light. He found himself staring at the white-tiled ceiling. He opened his eyes wide and was surprised where he was. Ah-yeong saw that he was in the hospital with the werewolf Cho Ji-yoon and the white fox Yeonsi by his side. He got up from the bed. The first person he saw was Suan, and he shivered with his voice trembling, wondering if he was dead because he could see the angel of death standing in front of him. Suan made a joke, looking at him with threatening eyes. It's true he's dead, and he has to come with him now. He pulled the covers off tightly and let him scream, while Yeonsi slapped the Grim Reaper, telling him to stop joking around. He shouldn't joke around like that when Kim Ah-yeong was injured. Back at Kim Ah-yeong, they asked if by any chance she remembered anything that happened last night. The only thing he remembers is that there was an accident, but he doesn't know what happened after that. He pointed at the Grim Reaper. If he doesn't die, then what is he doing here? The werewolf Ji-yoon enters, explaining that Suan was the one who found him at the crash site. He called an ambulance and told others of Kim Ah-yeong's situation, apologizing to the Grim Reaper for being so rough around him. He thanked her for saving him, even though Suan assured him it was nothing. After all this, he owed it to her to take care of his dog Jinjin. Then a nurse came and said if the patient woke up, they would do a re-examination before he was allowed to go home. When Kim Ah-yeong returned to her house and was greeted by her cat Jae-ha, she heard what happened from the Grim Reaper, and she was very worried. Luckily, he was fine, even though his body might look weak, but he was actually quite strong. Suan looked down at the cat and nodded, and Jae-ha did the exact same thing. Like they were hinting at each other about something. They called Kim Ah-yeong. There was actually something they wanted to discuss with him. They told him the car crash yesterday was caused by an evil spirit. This caught his attention as he turned around, wanting to know what they meant by what they said. While looking at the floor, Suan explained that it was an evil spirit manifested from many different animals that had died from a car accident. He tried to catch it with Jae-ha, but the demons ran away when he followed his trail. It was then that he found Kim Ah-yeong's unconscious body. He didn't understand why an evil spirit jumped in front of his car on purpose like that. It turns out that when animals turn into evil spirits, they tend to cause accidents the same way they die. It's their way of taking revenge on humans. Since these beasts and evil spirits died through car accidents, they try to do the same to others. If this was the case, then Kim Ah-yeong insisted that they needed to catch this vigorously before attacking again. But the Grim Reaper explained that there was a bit of a problem when he wielded his sword. They usually lose to a large amount of energy. They could perish on the spot. Whoever uses his sword cannot ascend to heaven. Jae-ha thought it was cruel to face the evil spirit in that way. After all, that evil animal spirit was created from an animal that had a terrible accident. Kim Ah-yeong understood, but it was too dangerous to leave that thing out there knowing he was right. Suan lowered his head. If that was what he wanted, he would use his sword to eradicate it before it harmed someone. Otherwise, the cats don't want this to happen. Even though car accidents happen due to humans opening artificial roads in areas where the animals could once roam freely, it's unfair to them when they don't give them a chance to ascend to heaven. With everyone looking at him to answer, Kim Ah-yeong didn't know what to do. All he wanted to do now was rest because he was really tired. In that case, everyone said goodbye and left him in peace. They could go and track down the evil spirit themselves while he recovered after they left. Kim Ah-yeong collapsed into her comfortable bed. He couldn't help but think of all those poor animals and evil spirits. He knew that his cat was right when he said it was unfair to deny them access to heaven. He rolled around in bed, trying not to think about it. Those animals aren't just people who have died illegally in the world, not to mention Ah-yeong, who almost died because of that. He tried to go to sleep, not wanting to think about anything else. He was so tired that it didn't take long, though he found himself inside a dream world. Purple skies and pink floors, wondering where she is. He heard sobbing along with screeching tires and cars crashing. In this dream, many different kinds of animals who had all been injured by their cars screamed it was so unfair for them to die this way. Our protagonist finds that he can't move and is forced to look at this horrific sight, like a beast turning into an evil spirit. With many beast eyes saying they would never forgive the filthy humans and would avenge them, there were growls and hisses. Kim Ah-yeong looked over the monstrous beast with frightened eyes. She instantly woke up back in the realm of the real world. He gasps and springs up and puffs out his shivering hands, and it takes him a moment to realize it's just a dream even though it hurts so much. He didn't know how he was going to get back to sleep. In the morning the sun was still shining all day, and he was forced to work must not be feeling too well. He was depressed and exhausted. The Grim Reaper Suwon enters, and his aura is the complete opposite, full of life and happiness. Even though he notices that the doctor doesn't look good, he explains that he had a terrible nightmare last night. Then Suwon said the reason he came here, he wanted to ask the doctor if the doctor could lend this animal hospital only for one night. Because apparently there is no better place than this hospital to collect ghosts and evil spirits. Ghosts and spirits are usually very fond of hospitals, because this is the place where life and death cross. Like how a moth was attracted by bright light, he wanted to use this to his advantage, summoning all the evil spirits. Kim Ah-yeong, as the owner of this hospital, spoke up. Realizing what he just heard from Suwon, Suwon wants to use his hospital as a place to trap the spirits. Kim Ah-yeong became emotional. He then stood up to make calculations with the Grim Reaper, Suwon. However, werewolf Choi Ji-yoon held his hand. Prevent doctors who are emotional. How could this person be so shameless as to ask that in his hospital? Jae-ha appeared at the hospital casually saying that the Grim Reaper had a point in this. This could be their chance to gather all the evil spirit beasts in this area and exterminate them in one shot. Plus, Suwon is willing to give something in return for allowing him to do this. He clenched his fist and shook his hand as if calling out something. Then he pulled out what looked like a black stone. Apparently it was created from the high pressure of hot hellfire. It is a diamond in its purest form. The doctor wasn't impressed. It just looked like a normal rock, and it would have been much better if he had just given him some money. Suwon explained that it only looks like rock because it hasn't been processed. But Kim Ah-yeong didn't budge. All the evil spirits had caused so much damage around her hospital. A few days ago there was a big fire. How was he supposed to trust the Grim Reaper to take care of his hospital when he was barely able to do his job? Luckily, Suwon knew just what to say to change his mind. He asked if he wanted to keep having bad dreams every night because he was weak. That's why it's easy for evil spirits to take advantage of it. That was also why he always had nightmares every night. It's not natural, it's caused by an evil spirit. Kim Ah-yeong remembered that nightmare clearly. There was no way she would want to go through it every night. She was fine. She could use the hospital, but only for tonight. It didn't take long for the Grim Reaper to make preparations outside. He set a table offerings for the spirits of raw food. Kim Ah-yeong gagged at the smell of blood and raw flesh, whereas Yeonsi was practically drooling because it all looked so good on her. They stood inside the bubble, while all the normal people passed by regardless of the bubble's force field hiding them from human eyes. Suwon's hands started shaking and jingling something like a bell in his hand, and waving a fan while singing unusual words in front of the food. The doctor is watching closely, seeing that he started his plan just then. The evil spirit in the area takes the bait and all rush to eat it. The shocked Kim Ah-yeong didn't expect there to be as many. This was too much. Eyes shone for Jae-ha, who covered the spirits carefully until he found the evil spirit they were looking for here that had caused all the cars to crash. The cat and the Grim Reaper approached quickly with a piece of meat and threw it into the spirit's mouth, which caught it easily. They were all focused on the food and paid no attention to the Grim Reaper, who had already started drawing his sword. Suwon raised his weapon in the air, slicing the evil spirit at the center. He thought it would be easy enough, but the spirit split in two, just like before he tried to fly and escape. He could only watch the spirit slip out of his reach. This was definitely not part of the plan. Luckily, Yeonsi stepped there and stopped the spirit from flying away using her foxfire ability. Suwon developed a smile and thanked him for the help. But Yeonsi's expression didn't look happy. It turned out that the firefox had just made the evil spirit split open again. It was like a hydra, and it didn't seem like it would stop. It kept on dividing into more animals. Too many to count. Suwon has a backup plan they can try, though he admits it's a slightly extreme plan. He reached into his pocket and promised that he would do nothing not to damage his hospital. He pulled a sort of long green scroll that unraveled and stretched towards the sky. blue lightning crackling, causing a black hole of mass to emerge from the text of the scroll. This black mass formed into the shape of a grabbing hand, holding all the spirit beasts tightly, not letting go. Yeonzi cheers, it really works. Kim Ah-yeong was behind him, and wasn't as cheerful as the spirit beast was communicating with him. He could hear their voices calling for help just like they did in his nightmare. It caused him so much pain that he collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The aggressive Grim Reaper recommends he stay in favor of the evil spirit specifically targeting him. Now that her weak body made her an easy target, Kim Ah-yeong couldn't help but listen to all the cries and despair of these animals. Even though he shouted that they should stop jumping out onto the street, in front of Suwon they shouldn't continue like this. It wouldn't be right if that was the case. Someone asks what he wants him to do otherwise. But Kim Ah-yeong didn't answer as she was blinded by a light coming from behind her. It was the headlights of a large car beaming at her. It wasn't real though, and just an illusion of the spirit. He heard cars crashing and animals crying for their mother. This must be what they all felt in their final moments. The doctor ran back to the entrance of his hospital without saying another word. The spirits watched him closely as he opened the door to the clinic. He understood that they were hurt. With a strong push, he swung the door open and opened it wide, allowing the spirit beasts to enter. He felt guilty for them. He let them in. He will treat them one way or another. This made Suwon wonder whether the doctor was possessed by something because he was trying to treat the spirits. Suwon was too confused, because this would also be very dangerous for Kim Ah-yeong. But Kim Ah-yeong didn't think about or pay attention to that. To his worry, he placed a lot of medical supplies on the table and shouted for all the spirits to enter. They pushed their way through the hospital, pushing past Yeonsi and the others, and they made a beeline for the doctor, and they didn't slow down. Suwon waved his hand in the air, creating a blue light protecting the doctor in the gravitational field. Spirit power rose up against him. They feel desperate to get it inside. Kim Ah-yeong told the Grim Reaper to release the gravitational field protecting his body. These spirits were nothing but poor children. Their hatred might be resolved if he could heal them. He didn't know if it was possible, but he had to try. Suwon thinks he is crazy. They are no different from beasts. If they see his weakness, they will devour his soul. It's a risk. He was willing to accept it, no matter if it was dangerous. He had to give it a try. He also had faith that he would step in to save her if something went wrong. Suwon also gave up giving the doctor a gravitational force field. What does he want, these spirits? Pounced on him like a flea on a dog. First, he didn't know what was happening. Then he started to feel the memories of these animals flowing into his mind. A black crow was flying across the sky on a cloudy day. The crow took a short time to land on the ground, and he pecked some food around. This was the last moment of the crow before a car ended his life that moment, and also this memory almost made the doctor faint. As he clutches his head, werewolf Ji-yoon brings him gauze and elastic bandages. Now it showed in him that the crow was bruised and battered. He cried in pain, saying to hold on for a while until Ji-yoon returns with medical supplies to bandage the crow's wound with an elastic bandage. And the doctor saw that. He feels a little better now. The evil spirit of the crow turned pale blue. Crow is grateful now he can go to heaven. As an angel of death, Suwon did the honor to open the gate to the afterlife, and crows jumped from the table onto the floor. He just kind of walked in past everyone watching closely. They couldn't believe they had managed to send one animal to heaven. It really works. That's when another employee, Hannah, barges into the room and comments on the food table set outside. It's weird. It's like some kind of ritual. Upon entering it, he saw a sight he could never dream of. About everyone huddled around the gate to the afterlife with a bunch of evil spirits waiting to be healed. His face turned stone and his glasses cracked. He couldn't believe what he saw. He then fainted and fell to the floor. They had to leave him like that for now because they were too busy with the demons. The next spirit came for Kim Ah-yeong. She showed her memories of the last moments a baby deer was walking with her mother one day. She stopped to admire an insect that was climbing a rock. This insect was so small and green it distracted the baby. And at that moment she looked up again. Her mother was already crossed the street because this baby has to cross alone whenever a white truck comes round the corner. There was nothing the baby deer could do this time. Ji-yoon goes to put on another elastic bandage. It didn't take long for him to bandage the little deer's wound. and allowing her to get rid of her grudge against humans because of this kind of action, her turning into an ordinary ghost and entering that afterlife is a miracle. If he could continue healing them, however, it wouldn't be easy as there were many spirits waiting in line. The werewolf Ji-yoon is ready to help the medical force as well as the Grim Reaper Soo-won, who keeps watch over the spirits. Kim Ah-yeong couldn't believe he was giving all of this away for free, all the while treating them. He saw the memories of many spirits such as abandoned dogs, stray otters, and even kittens abandoned by their owners. Now he's just putting his last patient finishing touches on. Squirrel with leg injury. The Grim Reaper closed the doors of the afterlife for today. While the doctor looks with a puffy face and eyes, looks at everything with a smile. He fell to his knees, which worried everyone, though he was just relieved that he was able to heal all of these animals. He was relieved that poor souls could get their rights and go to a better place. Then it was enough for him. After all this was done, then, Soo-won looked at them all. Then they were confused as to how they were going to explain this situation to Hannah. When she woke up, she would go mad. They can deal with that later. He had to go and rest because he felt as if he was dying after volunteering to do all the hard work for free. It had left her feeling sick and in need of a shoulder massage. He looked up to the side, noticing that Ji-yoon and Yeonsi were both fast asleep on the chairs getting their much-needed rest. It wouldn't have gone well without their help. Doctors knew he wouldn't be able to do any of this without help. The Grim Reaper sat near them. He warned him this was because he had too many patients. The doctor knew he was right. He had used all his strength and used up all the hospital supplies, and even that wasn't going to make him any money. Her cat sees the bright side. She comments that she must be feeling amazing. She managed a feat. But somehow now he felt regret more than anything. The hospital will make no profit at all this month. Though all the spirit beasts were healed, it brought a subtle smile to its face. So it's not all bad. Soo-won took something from his pocket. He took out the red bag as a reward for all of Kim Ah-yeong's hard work. Inside the bag is a legendary creature known as Hor-yeong. If Kim Ah-yeong wanted to use this, he could summon her anytime and anywhere. He shouldn't hesitate to use it in times of need. As Kim Ah-yeong admired her gift, the other employees started to regain consciousness. She rubbed her head and sat down at the worst time. The first thing he saw was Kim Ah-yeong's Hor flying through the air, while her boss was standing beside the Grim Reaper and a talking cat. Her glasses shattered completely, and tears fell from her eyes. This was all too much for her, and her screams could be heard from the street. Ah-yeong was forced to spend all night staying up to explain everything that had happened to her. A week has passed since that night, and that day Dragon Chung-ah has returned to the animal hospital to see the doctor. Kim Ah-yeong's employee named Hannah is careful of everyone who enters the hospital. He hid behind his boss. Ah-yeong tries to tell that Chung-ah is a regular customer here so she doesn't have to worry. Seeing the situation, Chung-ah says that she is an ordinary human, but Hannah doesn't believe it. When humans used to visit animal hospitals, they brought animals with them. They did not come alone. He also saw around here a lot of dragons. Chung-ah, nervously sweating in the end, decided to tell the employee the truth. It's true, she is a legendary beast. She is a blue dragon, and the youngest daughter of the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. After revealing her identity, Chung-ah looks into the employee's face, asking if she will try to dissect her now, or if she will try and sell her as a pet. Hannah runs away in fear, and asks the dragon to stay away from her. Chung-ah chuckled, while Ji-yoon entered the clinic behind her, with the white fox on her shoulder. She was the one who asked him to come to the hospital today, even though he didn't think she would actually show up there. Actually, something has been bothering him that he wants to talk about Ji-yoon. He wanted to get stronger to muster his courage. She's not as brave as a doctor, and she doesn't have any magical powers like the white fox. The only thing she goes for is her strength. When yokai appeared not too long ago, he wasn't any help at all. Chung-ah was surprised to hear those words. A temporary pause. Choi Ji-yoon thought about the answer. For now he just wanted to become strong enough where he would be able to protect those around him. The path wouldn't be easy, but Chung-ah was willing to help. The Blue Dragon household is a household full of warriors. None of them cannot wield a weapon. However, Chung-ah admits it will be hard for her to get past her family. It is knowledge of martial arts for Ji-yoon. He is part werewolf, and his knowledge may not suit him. but he can introduce him to a great teacher who might be more suitable for werewolves. Chung-ah asks him to come to the Blue Dragon household to train her, which is located in Gangwon-do. Ji-yoon looked at her boss Kim Ah-yeong with puppy eyes, wondering if he could get some time off from work to go and train. He said he could only take a week off. Dragon suggested that she should come with him. He should be working all the time, and should have some fun time. It would also be a good idea to bring Hannah too. Kim Ah-yeong was confused whether they went to practice or play. Chung-ah explains that they'll be doing a bit of both. At this point, the white fox Yeonsi is excited to tag along too. It's nice that they can practice and have fun. It's like killing two birds with one stone. Finally, Kim Ah-yeong gave up. She would go as long as they stopped begging her like a fox, and everyone jumped with joy. They will have fun getting to know each other better another day. There was the sound of screeching tires as it stopped on a road. Everyone got out of the car wearing summer clothes and sunglasses, almost like they were on vacation. They couldn't believe the size of Chung-ah's house, as they thought it would be somewhere deep in the mountains, and didn't expect it to be a large villa right next to the beach. An employee named Hannah is with them, and is worried that there will be ghosts around. Doctor told him to relax. Nothing will happen to him. He also commented on Ji-yoon's appearance with a bright shirt and sunglasses. He doesn't look like he's here to train, the werewolf sheepishly admitting he hasn't been to a beach since he was young. It was then that Chung-ah stepped out to greet them all. Behind him were two officers who would assist them during their stay. Ever since Kim Ah-yeong became their family doctor, all the dragons wanted was to make sure her stay was perfect. It didn't take long for some of the other dragon brothers to step out. On the left is the second son named Chung Yul, and so on the right is the second sister named Chung Ryan. He didn't expect the dragon family to have such good genes, but their good looks were completely on a different level. One of the brothers from the dragon, Chung-ah, explains that the guests who will be helping Ji-yoon's training have arrived, so they should all leave, and there will be a perfect time for introductions later in the dining room. The waves crash against the sandy shore and the sunlight is reflected off the water. Kim Ah-yeong can't believe that everyone has their own villa. This place is the perfect vacation spot. He took in a breath of fresh air and couldn't wait to finally relax. That's when he heard a disturbing voice. It came from the white fox Yeonsi, who happened to be in the villa next door. She was very lucky. The doctor decided to go to the dining room with the cat as a whole. On the way there, Jae-ha nagged the owner, asking why they gave everyone their own villa. He was distracted by his cat's whining. Kim Ah-yeong tripped over a rock and hurtled forward, landing face first. Then before falling, Kim Ah-yeong felt someone hug her. He rubbed his head and looked up to thank the man for catching him, but after seeing him, he couldn't get the words out when he saw the man. It was a white tiger in a Hawaiian shirt. Kim Ah-yeong was taken aback in shock, but the cat wasn't. It seemed he knew the white tiger. Dan calls her by her name Mujin, and she introduces herself as Jae-ha, the great mountain king of the West. Mujeon tried to remember who Jae-ha was, but his thoughts were interrupted by someone arriving angrily. The white-haired man came scolding him for walking around in the form of a tiger. It was the brother of the white tiger. His name was Baek Yuran. The cat recognized him too and told his owner not to be rude to these great people. They were protectors in the Western world, a heir to the white tiger household. Hearing this made the doctor even crazier. Mujin apologized to his brother because it was not right for him to go around in his animal form. The two of them had just arrived and were looking for directions to where the dining hall was. As the doctor is on his way there too, they all leave together, and they forgot about the poor cat. In the dining room served a bunch of food that is so delicious. Yeonsi can't wait to eat, but she has to wait for everyone else. When they arrived to eat, Chung-ah came and made an announcement. He called everyone's attention and introduced the specially invited white tiger all the way here to help train Ji-yoon. They are Baek Yuran and Baek Mujeon from the tiger family. In his humble claim that neither of them are great fighters, but they will be looking forward to helping in any way they can. He also apologized to his brother again. He always walks around in his tiger form. When Moonjin tried to explain himself, he stomped his feet to silence him, also apologized to the other dragon and dragon brothers, because he was the one who broke the teeth of Chungun's dragon brother. Because his tooth was injured in a fight, he had to go to the doctor to fix it. The white tiger wasn't there to help him, so they felt partly responsible for Chungun's injuries. Even though Chung-ah assures them, it's good. It was all taken care of by Dr. Kim Ah-yeong, a doctor who is respected and known as a legendary veterinarian. Kim Ah-yeong was surprised by the rumors about her among the legendary beasts. The tiger had heard a lot about him. They were happy that finally they all got to meet him. Baek-yuran hopes that the white tiger family will soon become regular patients at her hospital. Kim Ah-yeong didn't know what to say because she was faced with such high praise from him. And suddenly he felt so much pressure. Like his peaceful vacation wouldn't be so peaceful. The next few hours. After finishing all the food, Kim Ah-yeong returned to the villa to rest even though she felt full. Because the food is amazing. Kim Ah-yeong thought that after she woke up she would take a walk on the beach. Not yet sleeping soundly, he was disturbed by someone knocking on the door. Turns out it was an employee named Hannah. It was Hannah who screamed that she was scared. Tears streamed down her face and her body shaking, she fell to her knees. A tiger walking on two legs is just too scary. Will it devour him? He begs not to leave him alone. Hannah was very afraid that the tiger would eat her. Then the doctor said to her, if previously Hannah believed in Ji-yoon, he was the one who decided to come here with them, so he had to stop acting so scared. Kim Ah-yeong brought up the fact that Hannah was fine around Ji-yoon, so he shouldn't panic around the others. This confuses Hannah as she is still under the impression that Ji-yoon is human. He panics if Ji-yoon isn't human. Kim Ah-yeong quickly realized she was screwed, and Hannah wasn't going to let this go. He demands to know the truth. Who is Ji-yoon really? This made Kim Ah-yeong's position difficult. He was dripping with sweat. Hannah pushed him into the apartment and asked about Ji-yoon's identity. In the end, our protagonist tells his employees that Ji-yoon is actually a legendary beast. He's a werewolf, to be exact. Hannah was taken aback. Boss knew he was a werewolf all along, and still working on it. Kim Ah-yeong tried his best to calm Hannah down. Ji-yoon is fine. He can even control himself in his werewolf form when he transforms. Another topic about legendary beasts that he took on was about his cats. Her cat is actually a tiger named Jae-ha, who used to rule the mountains, but now he's just an overweight cat who isn't dangerous at all. At this time, the phone rang, so Ah-yeong walked over to pick it up. It was a call from Chun-yul, who told him that Ji-yoon's training would start soon. He had to come to the training center. Even though only Ji-yoon would be practicing, it would be nice if Kim Ah-yeong learned some basic self-defense as well. After the phone call, Kim Ah-yeong turned to her employee and asked if she wanted to come with him to train with the werewolves. At first, Hannah immediately refuses, but then she realizes if she doesn't go, she will be alone, which is much worse. Kim Ah-yeong went to the training center. Ji-yoon and Yeonsi were all wearing robes. They are ready to start, while their opponents are Moojin, Chung-yul, and Yuran. Hannah was there too, though she kept her distance and hid behind a pillar. Now that everyone gathers around him. The time to start practicing a healthy mind means a healthy body. In other words, you have to have a healthy mind so that your body becomes stronger. Ji-yoon is focused and listening intently, like the student model, while Yeonsi gets increasingly distracted, prompting the teacher to hit her with a bat. All they have to get rid of all their sorrows and useless thoughts and clear their minds, because they only have 1 week. They will skip the basics. The teacher introduces Mugoen is a master of martial arts, who will teach Ji-yoon. Yorin is a master of swordsmanship. He will train Dr. Kim Ah-yeong to use his blue dragon-tooth sword. And finally, Chung-yul points at his brother Chung-un. Even though he may look useless, he is actually very skilled in magic. He will help Yeonsi in magic. Chung-un was inwardly very upset that his brother had introduced him in such a manner. Then Kim Ah-yeong raised her hand and asked something. The reason he's here for vacation is not to train. But Chung-yul said if he could take a vacation after he finished practicing. She assured him the training was very simple and he would be able to enjoy all his free time after that. There was also something else he wanted to ask. Although the cat was originally a tiger, but now he is trapped in the cat's body. Is there a way for him to return to his original form? The white tiger could see that both Jae-ha's body and soul were sealed into this new cat's body by a human. This must have been done by someone with extraordinary skill. Moojin was curious how he ended up being a cat. However, Jae-ha shyly looked at the floor. He broke taboos and feasted on human flesh. The teachers whispered among themselves after hearing this. Since Jae-ha was put in a cat's body as punishment, they could get in trouble if they tried and put him back. In the end, they came up with a plan. If Jae-ha could tell whoever's last name Seal it, they could go and beat this guy up. This will probably change it. The cat jumped. Jae-ha couldn't believe they would actually help him. And Jae-ha took a deep breath, saying the name of the one who sealed him. His name is Shin Jun-seob. The teachers all gasped in shock as if they had heard of this person before. They asked to make sure they hear. He was right whether he said the person's name was Seo Jun-seob. Of all people, why should he do it? The teachers realized that the situation was worse than they had initially thought. Kim Ah-yeong was curious about who. Was this why they were all so worried? According to rumors, Shin Jun-seob is known as the best exorcist. Humans say he seems very terrible, or at least very strange. One thing's for sure, he definitely doesn't sound like the average guy. Kim Ah-yeong was sure this man couldn't be that bad. After all, he was the one who introduced Ji-yoon to the priest. And he created the silver necklace that she now wears. Yuran had heard that story before. He got strong by giving alcohol to Imuji. Imuji in Korean folklore is a snake that ascends to the sky as a dragon. But unfortunately, the next day he became drunk. Because of that, he couldn't go up to the sky. In human terms, it would be equivalent to a being failing a very important test. There are also rumors about him hitting a mermaid and stealing her pearls. He mentions he is a wanderer who has neither home nor temple. Where he lived is very difficult to trace. She was disappointed. Jae-ha understood and nodded. It was too difficult. And she's fine just living as a cat. She knows not getting her hopes up over such things. The atmosphere in the training room turned somber, so everyone split up to begin their training. Kim Ah-yeong went down to the beach to practice swordsmanship with Yuran earlier. Training starts. Yuran asks him if he has studied martial arts before. The doctor did taekwondo a bit when he was young, but he also didn't really understand what was so special about a dragon-tooth sword. It only felt like an ordinary sword when he saw it. Yuran explains that the blade of a sword with dragon teeth almost never wears down. Both blades have the power to protect the user himself. Then Yuran asked Dr. Kim Ah-yeong to think of the words that entered her mind, and then the sword entered his body. Kim Ah-yeong was shocked and confused as to where the sword had disappeared. Then Yuran said that the sword was in his body. Now he must try to think about saying out. When he did this, the sword reappeared like magic. The sword returned to his hand as before. The blue dragon-tooth sword can be summoned any time when needed, and can also be stored in his body when he doesn't need it. Since evil spirits were so common, it would be better if he always kept them away. Baek Yuran grabbed to his side, drew his own sword. It was time to start the lesson. He charged forward towards Kim Ah-yeong and fought him. Who doesn't know what to do? He panicked and begged the teacher not to come any closer. He closed his eyes and swung his sword, hoping for the best. Luckily, it was just a random swing. He was somehow able to block the attack, even though Kim Ah-yeong felt really shocked. Yuran explained that this was normal. The dragon sword was able to do so to enhance the owner's movements to a certain extent, and even for the worst attacks. Swordsman is somewhat capable. Today they're going to cover the basics of what to do. The doctor has no problem wielding a sword if he studies it with his head down, waiting to see what he will do. At the end of the day, he and Ji-yoon are both exhausted after their studies. It turned out that the training was much more difficult than they had thought. The two of them could barely lift their heads from the table. Yeonsi, the white fox, rushed in, shaking the two of them. It seemed that he had argued with his teacher Chung-eun. Both of them hurled insults at each other. He tries to explain the situation, but lies. He was too tired to care and asked them to just talk one by one. Chung-yul is disappointed in his brother why he is acting like a child like this. Meanwhile, there's a very important guest in their house. He tried to explain this to himself. It was so unfair to this little kid. Before he could finish his sentence, Chung-ah's voice came into the room. He brought news that tomorrow they have a very special guest. Tomorrow will be a very special guest. They could barely invite this guest because tomorrow was the full moon. But this guest is so important that when he arrives, it will be really good for their training. Ji-yoon and Kim Ah-yeong were both interested, wondering who they were talking about, who the dragon had explained earlier. That they had enough luck to invite him. He is Wolgung Hanga Nim. It is said she is a beautiful fairy who lives in a palace on the moon. He was an old friend of the Blue Dragon family, and he had agreed to accept their invitation as the special guest. To be specific, she was a goddess who watched over the moon, so there was a chance she might be helping Ji-yoon a lot, while Kim Ah-yeong was shocked. She is a real fairy, and he bets on her. The beauty is really out of this world. She says, shocking Chung-ah, who thinks the doctor must have heard her legend. He was sure before that he was a fairy who lived on the moon. But there was another legend. Her Hanga was originally the wife of the legendary heaven archer Ye. He was so skilled as an archer that he could shoot down 9 out of 10 suns in the sky. But sadly, the sun he shot just so happened to be the son of the celestial emperor, Sangjae, and Sangjae punished him to be banished to the human world. To return to Hanga heaven, and he had to go through many hardships. And finally found someone to call Seowangmo, a queen who handed them 2 immortality pills. It is said that taking 1 pill will make you immortal, but taking 2 will turn you into a divine being and allow you to ascend to the heavens. It's a powerful drug indeed. However, Hanga chose to betray her husband, and secretly consumed the 2 pills and allowed her to ascend to the sky. But betraying her husband was considered a grave sin, and so was the punishment. His body turned into a frog and was unable to return to heaven. He was left alive on the moon, namely the legend about the moon frog's warm woolgoon. Kim Ah-yeong's comment, which was based on the legend of Hanga, sounded like a greedy person. Chung-ah agrees, but advises Kim Ah-yeong to be careful of her words when she finally arrives. They shouldn't bring up things and talk about legends, or her husband. Hanga looks like an ordinary frog, but slightly bigger. This is all of interest to doctors, though he wonders to himself whether this frog will really be able to help Ji-yoon. He knew how much he hated being a werewolf and didn't want him to live up to his expectations. Until the next night, on the full moon. Suddenly Kim Ah-yeong heard a bang on her door outside. He heard heavy gasps as something huge and vicious came out. He took a breath. He worries about who it is, and sweat drips down his cheeks until he hears Ji-yoon's voice. She knocked frantically while crying. He turns into a wolf on a full moon, but he is annoyed that he has nothing to wear. Kim Ah-yeong opened the door, feeling irritated at Ji-yoon, who came to her for help. Does he think any clothes fit a werewolf? Because the outfit was double her size. He pushed her away and said that he should borrow some clothes from Mujin, the white tiger. Moments later, Mujin gave him a Hawaiian shirt and shorts. The white tiger just laughed. She bought beach clothes with her brother. Baek Yuran appeared behind Mujin and gave him a kick. It's important for Ji-yoon to dress properly because Hanga will be arriving soon. 2 white tigers, siblings bickering in the middle of the passage. Kim Ah-yeong believed that in this way the 2 siblings were related. It was then that Chung-eun appeared holding a suit. He had looked everywhere for everyone. Chung-eun then handed after his formal black suit to werewolf Choi Ji-yoon's chest. He realized it. If Ji-yoon doesn't have clothes that fit, so this suit was made especially for him. The measurements had to be precise, as he has a keen eye for this kind of thing. Ji-yoon was brought to tears by this kind of attitude. Chung-eun also has clothes that fit Mujin. He couldn't meet a frog in a stupid Hawaiian shirt like that. But he didn't care. How he loved them. After his sister threatens to beat him again, Mujin reluctantly does as he's told to wear the suit with Ji-yoon. They are so fit that it has even earned some praise for werewolves. See how good he is. The doctor is even contemplating getting a suit made especially for him. This is also the first time the cat has worn a formal suit. Meanwhile, Yeonzi was amazed when she saw Ji-yoon in that outfit. He couldn't believe how cool he looked. His ears, teeth, and even his tail looked good. It was also the first time Hannah's employees had seen her in that form. He admitted that it wasn't as scary as he thought. According to Hannah, werewolf Ji-yoon looks more like a big puppy. He's not scary at all. Everyone was standing in front of the entrance in the hall of Chung-ah's house. Everyone's attention, Chung-ah said. He pointed towards the entrance. Ji-yoon waits patiently in his new suit with the doctor, and Hannah standing right behind. They watched closely as a guest. And when guests came into the room, Kim Ah-yeong and Hannah's faces were like being slapped right away. Hanga enters with a look of horror. Hanga definitely doesn't look like an ordinary frog. He was a giant with more affinity for a normal toad. Warma came and first greeted the dragon family. He complimented Chung Yul and Chung Ryul on how pretty they looked. They must have used a special moisturizer. After the pleasantries, Toad got to the point. He wanted to know who they were. The dragon also introduced them to the frog. The dragon gave a beckon to the werewolf, who was standing awkwardly like a statue. He lowered his head to show respect to the frog. "Her name is Choi Ji-yoon," she introduced herself. Hanga's eyes narrowed when he saw what kind of creature Ji-yoon was. It was his first time seeing one of its kind, which he never heard the story before. He was impressed that he was able to maintain self-control thanks to the metal necklace. Then Chung-ah returned to introduce someone else. She was Kim Ah-yeong, someone Hanga had wanted to meet. The frog came forward to meet Ah-yeong. He heard a lot of gossip about Dr. Kim Ah-yeong. She stepped forward and gave her best smile on her face. He introduced himself and gave her his hospital card. Hanga took the business card, and he took a good look at it. Then Chung Yul asked them all to come inside.